Okay, OBS just crashed for a sec. Let's see if this is working now.
Pro-pedophilia wing and the...
There we go. I don't know why it does this sometimes. Yeah, I know. Ignore. I don't know why OBS, like sometimes I have to like reset all of the like video capture, audio capture and shit. Anyway, let's continue. Or start.
Trouble in paradise? Those are the reports coming out of Washington today as fractures seem to be emerging in the GOP between the Republicans' pro-pedophilia wing and the party's extremely pro-pedophilia wing. Infighting between the two pedophile coalitions reached...
I don't know. Between the two pedophile coalitions is crazy. Oh my god. It's so funny, but also so true, which makes it so sad and tragic and horrible, but we also have to find humor in this moment. The way that this man can deliver these lines in such a serious manner, truly, bravo. Great work.
New levels of intensity in recent weeks, leaving GOP leadership to question how best to handle the future of their party's sexual attraction to minors. ONN's Jason Copeland joins us now from Washington with the latest. Jason, you've been in close contact with Republican insiders. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Dwight, well, this is really a battle for the soul of the Republican Party, plain and simple. You know, the GOP has historically welcomed a wide net from pederasts to ephebophiles, and there's always...
Oh my god. They are spectacular. The details. Look at the details. Ew, Matt Gaetz. Fuck him. Look at this. White House pastor condemns heretical post where Jesus Christ compares self to Trump. Oh my god. Incredible. They are doing their finest work. I'm so pleased with that.
It's been, you know, sort of moderate support for sexual attraction to children, but many in the base are now asking for a more full-throated endorsement. And like you said, this is really about the party of pedophilia's future, and right now it's looking a little bit split.
And the split playing out very publicly on social media just yesterday, with Senator Tom Tillis replying pretty tepidly to the most recent Epstein Files revelations.
Yeah, that's right. He's publicly calling everything in the Epstein...
Department of Justice publishes 3.5 million responsive pages in compliance with Epstein Files Transparency Act. Cool. Sunglasses face.
Files cool, which frankly, you know, to pro-pedophilia voters, this comes off as a pretty lukewarm endorsement.
Do you even stock playgrounds? Take it to Blue Sky. X is for troop. Oh,
sex trafficking,
which just isn't going to cut it in the post-Trump era of Republican pedophiles. A new Gallup poll showed only 44% of Republican voters being in favor of pedophilia, with another 43% being very in favor of it.
Yeah, and that's really what we're talking about here, Dwight. You know, for the last 10 years, the entire...
Look at this, too. Disney announces Zootopia 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
Party has been jockeying for who's going to succeed Donald Trump as the face of American pedophilia. And right now, Republicans are looking closely at some local elections for insight. And this centrist versus extreme dynamic is playing out in Republican primaries across the country.
Utah
this is
Senate
Utah State
race.
Senator incumbent Matt Riggs staking out the more moderate position on child sex abuse.
I think my record speaks for itself. No one, and I do mean no one, was more upset than me the day Millie Bobby Brown turned 18. I am a staunch and committed pedophile.
Pretty boilerplate talking points.
Exactly. You know, it's a lot of the same old promises that many just...
Oh. Just run of the mill.
aren't believing are going to resonate in exactly the same way anymore. And especially when you compare it alongside the more energized campaigns of some of the more charismatic sex criminals running, like Riggs' opponent Brock Granite, political outsider who fired back in a podcast appearance earlier this week.
Seducing underage boys and girls is a bedrock founding principle of the Republican Party. And it sickens me to see my opponent swoop in and try and steal valor from the real pedophiles on the ground. I looked it up. In the Epstein files, this guy's name appears less than 300 times. It's performative pedophilia.
Now, Senator Riggs has already responded on X saying, quote, "I enjoy molesting as much as the next red-blooded American pedophile. I just don't make it my whole campaign. We need to be responsive to kitchen table issues, or the only ones left at the table will be adults." Jason, these are strong words being said against fellow pedophile party members. Is there any sense?
Wait, we have another update with top news. This is the best thing they've ever done. I think this is the funniest thing they've ever done. Anti-war voter regrets casting 200 ballots for Trump. With all of this voter election fraud bullshit that doesn't exist.
They can find common ground here and come together on this?
You know, not without strong pedophilic leadership at the top, Dwight. You know, some think J.D. Vance could be that, but others say he just looks like a pedophile more than acts like one. P. Diddy certainly could have been an interesting outside candidate. But the bottom line here, Dwight, is this is an identity crisis for a party.
Marco Rubio, 1%. Yeah, nobody likes him. Jim Jordan, 3%. Ghislaine Maxwell, 10%. Just outperforming Marco and Jim. Yeah. And then 64% to no specific pedophile. One that is waiting in the wings for their moment of triumph in the spotlight.
We'll eventually need to decide, are they going to push forward and continue to build upon the pedophilia of Trump? Or will they take the path of the Matt Gaetz moderates, go back to their roots and once again commit to being the grand old pedophiles of Reagan?
Will be interesting to see how it plays out. Thank you, Jason. In response to the infighting, Democratic leadership is looking to capitalize politically. Members of the House and Senate today held a joint press conference dressed as little children, stating, quote, "You can all be pedophiles."
Oh, look at their bad drag. Look at their bad drag. Anti-war voter. Oh, wait, I already said that. I'm just so lost in the sauce of this.
If we can please have health care. Coming up
Witty
next, making America
please.
healthy again. More on RFK Jr.'s latest initiative to fill the Washington Monument reflecting pool with beef tallow. You've seen the news, now touch it with your fingers. To receive your monthly print edition of The Onion, head to membership.theonion.com today. With America's finest news source, the more you pay, the better the news.
Incredible. Truly their finest work, I think. Wow. Wow. Data colonialism, data centers on indigenous lands. Yes, I saw something about this. If we have time, we'll watch that. If not, I want to watch that tomorrow. Okay, moving along with some of the more humorous videos, or continuing, I guess I should say. This is iHip, and this is about Scott Jennings. Yet again, another closet case being exposed. Great work, everybody. This is what needs to happen. These fascists have to be outed because of their deplorable influence and takes and the harm that they are causing. All right. If it wants to work. Excuse me.
There is some piping hot tea on Elon Musk's free speech website involving none other than Press Pants Scott Jennings, the most universally hated man in cable news, an insufferable prick of the highest order, and Chef Joe Guerra on Twitter pumps says the following. Pop this up. Hi, Scott. You may not remember me from my Broadway performing days in NYC, but you're being a complete lying asshole. So here it is. Scott Jennings swings both ways. Not that I care. Who gives a shit? But he's lied about this since 2009. And there are at least 100 photos of him at Fire Island bars from back in the day. Hey, Adam Mockler, ask him about this on CNN. Chris Murphy used satire. Sitting Senator Chris Murphy responded to a report on Twitter. At least 26 Iranian Shadow Fleet vessels bypassed U.S. blockade. And sarcastically, Murphy says, awesome. Scott Jennings, not being the sharpest knife in the drawer, doesn't understand sarcasm. But let me get back to these bisexual batting for both teams rumors, because that's really what we're all here for, right? Chef Joe Guerra doesn't stop there with the Fire Island photos. He goes on. Scott Jennings is a liar. He was a liberal Republican and hitched his wagon to his orange master because Trump blackmailed him, and there's money there. If you want to know how Trump gets away with shit, just ask anyone who performed in the arts between 2002 and 2010 in NYC. Remember when you sued to go to Jack Rose Steakhouse and drink 6 martinis every night and hit on the waitstaff? Remember when you stumbled out of Trailer Park at 4 a.m. with a guy named Richie, not his real name, and kissed him for 30 minutes at karaoke night? Remember when you hung out at the Playwright and tried to take home dancers? Oh, then there's your extensive hanging out at Pravda on Houston. Remember those frosted glass bathrooms? Yeah. Everyone else does too. Chef Joe Guerra has said that he has given these photographs to a journalist that can vet these more thoroughly.
Good.
But I just want to say, as I always say, I have no problem if Scott Jennings likes to swing both ways. If he likes a penis from time to time and then changes his mind another day, I don't give a shit. It's the hypocrisy that is so disgusting. Pumps.
Well, and you look at this, and obviously we don't know that this is true. In the coming days, they're going to show us, are these allegations provable? But I found in my experience with lying
grab
people,
my food real quick. I'll be right back.
This chef, he has laid out a lot of details, unnecessary details that give credibility to the story. And just the final thing I'll say on this is, of course he does this. I mean, we don't know that for fact, but of course he does, because that's what MAGA does. They sit there and they say, we're family values. We only want traditional marriage. And then they're on Grindr crashing the site. Of course he's a hypocrite. Surprises me zero.
Yeah, and I would just point out that a lot of the times that that Grindr has crashed, I believe the majority of those times Scott Jennings was present. You can conclude from that what you will. But Josh, the next story I want to talk to you all about is yesterday you and I reported on Tucker Carlson. I had no idea that Trump was going to be this crazy, and I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And Adam Mockler, who I love, he is a young progressive media influencer on CNN a lot and goes toe-to-toe with alleged bisexual Scott Jennings. He dug out from the Fox News lawsuit where Fox had to pay $1 billion. These text messages from Tucker Carlson, pop this up. Adam says Tucker Carlson is not our friend. He should not be welcomed into civilized society as if he did nothing wrong. We can happily watch the MAGA movement self-destruct without mistaking Tucker as a good person. In 2021, while still at Fox News, Tucker Carlson privately texted about how much he hated Trump. Private texts also revealed that he knew the 2020 election was not stolen from Trump. Tucker would then go on air and say the exact opposite to tens of millions of Americans, that Trump was the best president ever and that Dominion voting machines were totally rigged. He intentionally told destructive lies to Americans en masse for career gain and profit. He would do the exact same today, just from a different angle. Tucker Carlson helped mainstream the great replacement theory by planting the seeds into millions of Americans' heads on primetime Fox News.
Yes, exactly.
Tucker Carlson doesn't
Against
genuinely
immigrants,
care about human rights or
Jewish
the, quote,
people.
sanctity of Islam. Remember, the enemy of your enemy is not always your friend. Pop up the text messages. Here is Tucker, January 4th, 2021. We are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait. He follows up, I hate him passionately. I blew up Peter Navarro today in frustration. I actually like Peter, but I can't handle much more of this. Josh, you saw the video yesterday where Tucker tries to apologize.
Well, and I think my take yesterday on it, and it's consistent with what it would be today, is that Tucker did not have an epiphany that Donald Trump is somehow an awful human being or a horrible leader. he had an epiphany that whatever he wanted from Donald Trump, he wasn't able to get anymore. And thus he changed his tune. And you can see, and we were talking about this earlier too, you can see these Republicans are complicit. And none of them like or respect Trump, but they bend the knee to Trump. They publicly will not speak against Trump. And that's even worse, in my opinion. I mean, it's even worse being complicit in that. And I would never think that Tucker Carlson is someone who would be a friend to human rights. Never in a million years. Like anytime that guy talks or speaks, regardless of what bullshit he says, you know that he's only saying it to serve his own interest, period.
And I think the through line here is that Tucker Carlson knows that Donald Trump's approval rating is like 32%. It's over. It is.
It's about
Jover.
money.
It is done. Put a fork in it, right? Greg Gutfeld and Fox, these people are financial Darwinists. They want their money to survive first and foremost. And Trump is a short-term gamble, and he's going to either drop dead or be in a nursing home or an insane asylum, which he likes to talk about.
Insufferable.
Here is Greg Gutfeld.
All of these people are
talking about taxing billionaires on Fox News. Play the clip.
Who says he wants to tax billionaires is not a selfless person. He is immune from that kind of pain. He can do well with $999 million, right? So don't. What he's doing is that he knows that any kind of transfer of wealth will never affect him. Once you get to be so rich, you tax anybody and anything because you know you're going to make it through.
Okay. So they're trying to criticize progressive gubernatorial candidate Tom Steyer about the taxing of billionaires, but he just admits it there. You can tax these bedwetting billionaires and they will never feel it. They will never feel it. But if you get on Twitter, you see Bill Ackman, you see all of these tech AI guys,
recognize it in certain cases.
The worst of the worst, Elon Musk.
The cognitive dissonance,
I
blatant.
am a victim. I cannot pay taxes. You cannot come after me. And even Fox knows how insane that is.
Astounding.
Well, I mean, these people are absolute whores and hypocrites. Greg Gutfeld, we all know he is dumber than a box of hot rocks. He likes to call people names about their appearance when he is a bra-needing man. So him sitting there on Fox News acting like, you know, he's a bad guy because he's a billionaire while he sucks off Donald Trump and Elon Musk and sings their praises. Like, he can't pick a lane because he doesn't give a fuck. He's an opportunist. He's a hypocrite. He sucks.
Completely agree. Moving along, Texas now can force schools to include the 10 Commandments in classrooms. Pop this up. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says Texas can force public schools to put up 10 Commandments posters. It's a horrible but predictable outcome that will undoubtedly be appealed to SCOTUS. This is Christian nationalism. Josh.
This was an en banc decision. It was a 9-8 decision at the Fifth Circuit, and it's one of the problems that a lot of us lawyers have with court decisions like this, where the court doesn't follow existing precedent, but we know that the court wants to get to a specific resolution. So what do? They create new law and they find new ways to issue those laws. And that's what happened in this particular case. It's clear that there's separation of church and state. It's clear that the 10 amendments in a public school would violate that, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. But the court wants it there. They want to. They no longer liked to separate church and state. That's no longer a principle that our government believes in. This existing government.
Have they ever really believed that?
It'll go to the Supreme Court, and I'm not any more optimistic.
It's especially bad now.
Will withhold these challenges either. I mean, I think we're just left with this for now until we can elect
the
leaders.
Supreme Court is
respect,
going to,
I think,
approve that.
The fact that religion doesn't belong in school, period.
Yeah. And I think that, once they start down this road, then you're going to have, you're going to have people that will make a lawsuit like the Satanist 10 Commandments, and you just open up this whole can of worms. But I just want to point this out. We have been sold a bill of goods and propaganda that America was found.
By the way, most Satanists are not actually like worshipers of Satan, but part of a counterculture movement that is about human dignity for people, and there being forces that tie us all together. So, I mean, there are like demonic cults and shit. Look at our government. Look at the Epstein class. That is a demonic cult. But that's just to clarify.
On religious freedom. That's a fucking lie. The freaks in England left all of the religious Puritans came here because they couldn't control and force their religion on everybody there. And they came here, and they have been trying for 250 years to make this a Christian nation. The people that ruin everything, the reason we can't have nice things, are these white evangelical Christians. Europe got the cool people, we got the religious freaks, and we're still dealing with it. All right, moving along. Trump, there's never been a better time to be a white collar criminal, which I'm
Europe
sure is
still
not very good
has
for
a
your
lot
business,
of
Josh.
these
But
freaks.
pop this up. The DOJ dropped 23,000 criminal cases, including hundreds of investigations into terrorism, white-collar crime, and drugs, while prosecuting 32,000 new immigration cases.
This is
in
why
just the first
I
6 months of
and
Trump's
other
second
people
term.
constantly
Josh.
bring up, what are we considering
this
to be
article's pretty powerful,
crime?
and I don't think there's any
Because
denying the
it's
fact that
criminalizing
white-collar
poverty
cases
most of the
involve
time
people that
when
have
these
a lot
people
of
are talking
money,
about crime.
have a lot of means. They're not going to prosecute those types of cases. They're not priority cases. Instead, we're going to focus on immigration. But one takeaway I did get from this article, in addition, was it cites a letter that was written in October of 25 by approximately 300 career employees with the Department of Justice. And briefly within that letter, it says that the Justice Department cannot uphold the rule of law when it carries out the president's retribution campaign and protects his allies when it violates court orders. Further says it also cannot keep our country safe when it ousts FBI employees, prosecutors, and it cannot protect civil rights when it drives out 75% of attorneys from the Civil Rights Division. So, and there's that article references this particular letter that was written by these career employees, and that this would be a good summary for those of you that don't know to read this, to see what's happening to the Department of Justice. It has been weaponized for some time now. We talked about that earlier. The rule of law is under attack. All of this stuff is real. And for those people that work in the trenches at the Department of Justice, those people that have integrity, they pretty much have all left by now. And so what you have are a bunch of lynch men for Donald Trump carrying out his orders on a day in, day out basis. And it's a scary time for us because it's the first time in our lifetime that we can remember having a Department of Justice that works at the complete behest of the President of the United States.
Pumps, a lot of Trump's campaigning in right-wing media, manosphere, and podcasting spaces is the deep state. We have to get rid of the deep state. What Josh just alluded to there is that was projection, and now he is literally installing a true deep state. Anybody who was a nonpartisan government employee that wanted to uphold the rule of law has been eliminated, and now they're trotting out multiple Cash Patels, multiple Pam Bondis in these positions. What is your take on all of that?
Well, I think you look at it and, the U.S. attorney's offices have lost so many good attorneys that were not political, that just did their jobs. And they were advertising on social media. We want people that have law degrees and are loyal to Donald Trump. Because here's the thing, Trump has no value for rules. He has no value for the law. He doesn't give a shit. He'll break it. It doesn't matter. It's an impediment to what he wants. And this will take generations. I mean, generations to undo this. And that bullshit projection about we're going to weaponize, it's weaponized against us. He's specifically calling out on social media, go after Comey, go after Letitia James. And then that's what happens. But what strikes me about this, all of Trump's stuff is smoke and mirrors, lies, hypocrisy, but not going after white criminals. Because he is a white collar criminal. That tracks because he's a white collar criminal. He doesn't want to pay the fines. He doesn't want to follow the law. So he doesn't want his buddies to either. And that's really the only truthful thing that I've seen him do. I don't give a shit about the law.
And I just want to say this. Let's be cautious about saying it's going to take generations to undo this. MAGA did this in 18 months. And it's going to take generations to undo this is the old incremental thinking of the Democratic Party. We too can be all gas and no brakes. We too can storm into the executive branch, storm into the Justice Department. We can storm into all of these departments and purge all of these dipshit Trump loyalists at record speed. Governing incrementally was what Merrick Garland did. And we have to completely let go of that style of language, because one thing Trump has taught the Democrats is you can govern all gas and no brakes. And we need to do it for justice, and we need to do it for good. And we cannot just cede, oh God, they've just broken the country forever. We have to go in there and ferociously reclaim everything, out all of these donors, out all of these loyalties. I'm talking like Nuremberg style trials for all of the people that have committed crimes. That's my take. Like, we need to change our mindset on this incremental fix thing, because that is the Democrats' worst feature.
That's right. And we've never seen anything like this before with the Department of Justice. But I think
and it's not just about replacing people, like how Jen is saying that there needs to be aggressive desire and motivation to change all of these oppressive systems, not only to govern in a way that is more progressive, but to actively dismantle the baked in racism, ableism, sexism, queerphobia, transphobia, discrimination that exists within the government, that it has to be front and center with how we are addressing issues and injustices that have happened to so many people in the past and is happening now currently, is continuing because these systems still exist. So it's about being mindful about dismantling these things. It's not just about like, okay, we need a social safety net. That is important. That's important. But we also need to be looking at how the system is functioning and where there are certain people who are benefiting from this system, specifically white supremacist Christian men, cishet men, where there are these disproportionate benefits that they receive.
We've learned one thing since the last election when we saw Merrick Garland come in, and within, he took 2 or 3 years to where he even started to investigate or prosecute these cases. That type of mentality is not going to work. You're not going to meet that force with that kind of mentality. You're going to have to come in fast, hard, and strong to change things and create waves. And there's no mistake about that, because you have a Department of Justice right now that basically is directing its own attorneys to violate their own ethical responsibilities and to basically seek out the president's retribution campaign. And we've never seen that before. So if you're going to stop that, you're going to have to do it with as much force as you're being met with.
That's what we have to do. We have to, as the opposition party, we have to do as quickly and as ferociously as they do, but for good. Restoration, atonement, a reckoning. Like, we have to do it.
And be very unapologetic about doing it. Admit that that's what you're doing and say, this is why we're doing it, and be honest about it.
Yeah, none of this tiptoeing. Oh, we don't want to have the appearance. No, we want to have the appearance that you guys suck. You guys are anti-American. You guys break laws. You guys are corrupt, and we're going to send you to prison.
And we're going to restore the rule of law unapologetically. Yeah. And if you don't like it, you get to go to prison.
That's right. We'll leave it there. All right. That's all we have. We will keep you abreast of the Scott Jennings stuff that is developing on Twitter right now, because I'm here for it. And make sure you subscribe, and we'll be back later with more news.
With it being sped up. I don't believe in prisons. The carceral system is racist, classist, because race is a class construct. Oh, look. Trump's approval slips among Latter-day Saints in Utah. Another video on this? Wow. I'm not holding my breath that there will be much movement. Also, I found out the other day that they recently changed a policy, the head of the church, that now women can be Sunday school presidents, which is just like one class on Sundays. And this is viewed as a huge move towards equality and that women are getting more opportunities. It's just all of these crumbs that they're saying like, oh, we are hemorrhaging membership because of all of the fascist, overtly white supremacist, discriminatory policies that we have. So, we have to make small concessions. That's the only way that they move with any of their policies and their doctrine. So that's amusing to me. If I was still a member, not like I would be, but that might be something that's like, wow, progress. See, progress happens. No, too little, too late. Okay, let's get to some of the headlines.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump announced Tuesday he's extending the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely at the request of Pakistan. An Iranian official tells BBC that Iran has still not decided whether it will attend a new round of peace talks with the U.S. later this week. Vice President J.D. Vance has canceled a planned trip to Islamabad, Pakistan. Despite the ceasefire, the U.S. continues to blockade Iranian ports. But earlier today, Iran attacked 3 cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz, seizing 2 of them. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas
good for Iran.
called the blockade
They should do this.
an act of war and thus a violation of the ceasefire, warning Tehran knows, quote, how to resist bullying, unquote, and threatening to completely close the Strait of Hormuz and strike energy and desalination infrastructure across the region. Meanwhile, the head of the International Energy Agency declared Tuesday the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran has created the worst energy crisis the world has ever faced. It comes as satellite images reveal multiple large oil spills spreading across the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz as a direct result of U.S., Israeli, and Iranian strikes on oil facilities and vessels, with environmental experts warning of an impending ecological disaster. The Pentagon confirms 13 U.S. service members have been killed and 415 wounded in the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Meanwhile, according to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, over 3,600 people have been killed in Iran by U.S.-Israeli strikes, among them 254 children. A 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon showed new signs of collapse Tuesday, as Hezbollah fired rockets and drones at Israeli forces for the first time since the truce took effect last Friday. Hezbollah said the strikes were in response to Israeli attacks on civilians and the destruction of homes and villages in southern Lebanon. Both sides accused each other of breaking the truce, even as Washington prepares to host a second round of talks between Israel and Lebanon tomorrow. Hezbollah is not involved in the ceasefire negotiations. Meanwhile, the Israeli military announced Tuesday that 2 soldiers have been sentenced to 30 days in military detention and removed from combat duty after one soldier used a sledgehammer to smash the head of a statue of Jesus Christ in southern Lebanon, while the other soldier filmed him. An Israeli army reservist shot and killed 2 Palestinians near a school in the occupied West Bank in the village of Al-Mughayir, northeast of Ramallah, on Tuesday. The Palestinian Ministry of Health identified the victims as 14-year-old Azza Nassan and 32-year-old Jihad Abu Naim, who were killed in a joint attack by Israeli settlers and soldiers that left 3 others wounded. Eyewitnesses say there was a volley of gunfire after settlers and army forces arrived in the village. The Israeli military said the gunman was an off-duty army reservist who had not been mobilized, that he had not been arrested, and that the incident was under investigation. This is Katham Al-Haj Ahmed, who witnessed the attack.
This is a reality in our village. It's a displacement operation. They aim to displace us. They attack us from all sides by shepherds, regular people, farmers, and both the army and the settlers are exchanging roles among them in the attacks.
2 senior Hamas officials in Gaza
the
have told the New
unlimited
York
violence of the Israeli government, settlers, people who are Zionist, American nationalists, Christian nationalists. There is unlimited thirst for death and violence. That is... There aren't even words because of all of the harm that is being committed by the U.S. and Israel. And yet, we have all of these so-called leaders who are supposed to be resisting this when, in actuality, they are complicit, actively supporting, enriching themselves and their donors from all of this violence. It's immoral, it's deplorable, it's disgusting.
The group is prepared to relinquish thousands of automatic rifles and other weapons belonging to its police force and internal security services. The officials said those weapons could be transferred to the Palestinian Administrative Committee established to govern Gaza under the Board of Peace, the international body led by President Trump to oversee the so-called ceasefire. But Hamas's offer falls short of the full disarmament and demilitarization of Gaza demanded by Israel, while Israeli forces continue attacks on the besieged territory. The Trump Justice Department indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center Tuesday on an 11-count federal fraud case. It alleges the prominent civil rights group secretly funneled more than $3 million in donor funds to paid informants embedded inside white supremacist groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, the Aryan Nation, and the National Alliance. The indictment, handed down by a federal grand jury in Alabama, charged the organization with bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The Southern Poverty Law Center rejected the charges as politically motivated, saying its informant program is used to monitor threats of violence and that the information gathered is routinely shared with local and federal law enforcement. This is Southern Poverty Law Center's interim CEO, Brian Fair.
This use of informants was necessary because we are no stranger to threats of violence. In 1983, our offices were firebombed, and in the years since, there have been countless credible threats against our staff. For decades, we engaged in unprecedented litigation to dismantle the Klan.
So what actually is happening is that the Trump administration is not appreciating their efforts to dismantle the Klan. There are many issues with 5013Cs, with nonprofits, non-government organizations, how there can be corruption. They are essentially the shadow state of the government. But there can be, they are not all created equal in what they are doing in the work that they are embarking on. So we have to also acknowledge that. But they are not liking that people were informing on their white supremacist actions. They are not condemning white supremacists, the Trump administration, because duh, they're all Klansmen. If not in name, they are in essence. So that is what is happening.
And other hate groups.
Several reports have revealed the 2 U.S. Embassy officials who died in a car crash in northern Mexico as they returned from a drug trafficking enforcement raid were covert CIA agents. The deadly accident on Sunday in the border state of Chihuahua also took the lives of 2 Mexican officials and has prompted the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, to start an investigation into the involvement of U.S. agents in counter-narcotic operations in Mexico. President Sheinbaum spoke from Mexico City.
We are investigating what these people were doing and which agency they were from. So far, the information we have is that they were indeed working together with the Chihuahua government. Let's put it that way. So the attorney's office needs to conduct a full investigation to determine if the Constitution or the national security law was violated, and the Chihuahua state authorities need to provide all the truthful information.
2 unnamed U.S. government officials who spoke to The Intercept confirmed the CIA has been running clandestine operations in Mexico as part of Trump's expanding intervention and crackdown across Latin America. In more news from Mexico, farming and indigenous communities and environmental activists have vowed to fight plans by Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to expand fracking in Mexico. Last week, Sheinbaum admitted to backtracking on her opposition on fracking, which marked a policy departure from her predecessor, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who was a staunch opponent of oil and gas drilling. Mexico's national oil company Pemex has reportedly engaged in fracking for years, including in the state of Veracruz, where local leaders say their lands have been devastated.
Opening the door to fracking is a betrayal to the people, to the indigenous peoples, to the original peoples of this country. Because during the previous president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador's 6-year term, one of his campaign promises was precisely to ban fracking in our country. President Claudia Sheinbaum was supposed to continue that.
Yeah.
Homeland.
So even though Claudia Sheinbaum is viewed as being more on the left, she is a socialist, I believe. It just goes to show how when people are in these positions of power, how easily they are bought, and that just having the socialist positions does not necessarily dismantle these structures of corporate greed and influence on governments.
Secretary Markwayne Mullin said Tuesday DHS will likely run out of funds to pay its employees by early May amidst the ongoing partial government shutdown that stretched for a record 67 days. President Trump earlier this month had approved the release of $10 billion in emergency funds from his so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as negotiations on Capitol Hill remained at a standstill. Mullin took to Fox News last night to blame Democrats for the shutdown, while Republicans have repeatedly blocked key demands to reform or defund ICE. They've recently proposed a budget that would grant DHS up to $140 billion in new deficit spending for Trump's deadly immigration crackdown. This is DHS Secretary Mullin.
My payroll through DHS is just over $1.6 billion.
He was approved by the House. So once again, the so-called leaders and representatives constantly bending the knee to fascism.
Every 2
because
weeks.
Guess what?
So the money is going extremely
they
fast.
Are very similar.
And once that happens, there is no emergency funds
if
after
not
that.
the same.
Democratic Congressmember Sheila Cherfilus McCormick of Florida resigned from the House Tuesday, less than an hour before the House Ethics Committee was set to discuss what sanctions to impose on her for violating
Stuart
more
Little
than
is my
2
son.
House rules and ethical standards. The allegations
Thank you.
on how her family's healthcare business
we were able to meet the sub goal. Thank you for the gifted subs. Very cool. Appreciate you.
$1 billion in COVID-19
anyone wants to add to this hype train, I will not complain.
Overpaid. Money prosecutors allege was funneled through a network
queer
of
streamer
businesses and family members to fund her
who's
2021
wanting to continue this work.
campaign. Cherfilus McCormick was indicted on federal criminal charges last year and has pleaded not guilty. She still faces a separate federal criminal trial in Miami. A new analysis by the National Women's Defense League has revealed dozens of U.S. Congress members have been accused of sexual misconduct over the past 2 decades. More than 50 accusations of workplace sexual harassment, largely coming from legislative staff, have been made against at least 30 lawmakers of both parties. The group also looked at dozens of accusations of sexual harassment outside the workplace against U.S. lawmakers, as well as misconduct on the campaign trail. This comes after Republican Congressmember Tony Gonzalez of Texas and Democratic Congressmember Eric Swalwell of California resigned from Congress earlier this month. Both of them face potential expulsion votes after they were accused of sexual misconduct. On Monday, the House Ethics Committee released a statement calling for survivors of sexual misconduct to report their accusations to congressional authorities. Many lawmakers are now calling for the expulsion of Republican Congressman Corey Mills of Florida as he faces an ongoing probe from the House Ethics Committee into allegations both of financial misconduct and sexual harassment. Mills has denied the allegations. And voters in Virginia approved a new congressional map drawn by the state's Democrat-controlled legislature. It would give the Democrats an electoral advantage in 10 of Virginia's 11 House districts. Democrats could also pick up as many as 4 new seats in this year's midterm elections. Virginia currently has 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans in its congressional delegation. The move is the latest chapter in a redistricting arms race that President Trump ignited last year when he urged Republican-led states to redraw congressional maps. Trump had asked lawmakers in Texas to create 5 more seats that favor Republicans in the state shortly after California voters backed a plan to create 5 seats that favor Democrats. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
All right. Continuing to move along, let's look at this Harvard professor answering Iranian government questions.
War ends, protest in Iran will not. I'm Professor Tariq Masood from Harvard University. Let's answer your questions from the internet. This is Tech Support Iran. Denunzio 1919 asks, is it wrong to call Iran a dictatorship? The Islamic Republic of Iran absolutely is a dictatorship, but it also has some electoral features that they're not quite enough to make Iran a democracy, but they're not totally meaningless. Article 5 of the Iranian Constitution says that the leadership of Iran must reside in the form of a religious cleric of great knowledge and virtue, the supreme leader. But then Article 6 of the Iranian Constitution says that the affairs of Iran will be governed according to public opinion expressed through elections. And so they have an elected president who serves 4-year terms, they have an elected parliament, and they even elect the body that is supposed to choose the supreme leader. The supreme leader is definitely on top. Everybody reports to him. He sets policy. He hires and fires the heads of the military apparatus. He sets the direction of the country. Everybody looks to him. But the president is in charge of day-to-day management. The president gets to set things like social policy. It's a system that really does have these hybrid features. So the first supreme leader of Iran, the guy who came up with the whole system, was this man, Ayatollah Khomeini, and he was the supreme leader until his death in 1989. He was replaced by this man, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This guy, by the way, was the president under Khomeini. He's also the person that we killed in February of this year. And he was replaced by his son, Mujtaba, although nobody has seen him since he assumed power. And many of the senior leadership of that country have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Could we say that the political system in Iran is about to crumble? They've managed to hold on so far. And some people might say that the regime is built precisely to withstand
this
kind
emote
of stress. It
we
can't be
unlocked
denied that the
because of
regime
the hype
now
train.
is under the most serious strain that it's
It gave
ever
that
faced
language
in its
choo
nearly
choo.
50
I did
years
not
of
do
history.
that.
Megan has hemorrhoids
cute?
asks, explain like I'm 5. What are Iran's Revolutionary Guards? Sorry about the hemorrhoids, Megan. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards, or what is known as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the Pasdaran after their Persian name, are one of 2 armed forces that the Islamic Republic of Iran has. It's basically a full-fledged military. It has an army, a navy, an air force. It also has a kind of special forces / covert operations arm called the Quds Force or the Jerusalem Force. And it also has a group called the Basij-e Mustadafin that the Iranian regime relies on mainly for mobilization, maintaining order on the streets. And that IRGC sits alongside a standard military called the Artesh. If you think about it, the standard military are more
Hello,
nationalist.
Junk
Their
Saint.
job
Welcome,
is basically
welcome.
to defend Iran's
Coase,
borders.
welcome.
The job of the IRGC,
Using the new
in contrast,
emote.
is to defend the
Very
Iranian
cute.
regime. They are the ones
How are you both
who
doing?
play a major role in cracking down on protest. They're also the arm of the state that supports all of the proxies across the Middle East, like Hezbollah and like the Houthis. The IRGC, by the way, is not just a military force. They actually have a serious role in the Iranian economy, and you can see estimates that they control anywhere from 20 to 60% of the Iranian economy, and they're involved in all kinds of industries like construction and media and even sports. Part of the reason that this regime is considered to be so strong and so durable in the face of repeated public protest is that they have a very ideologically committed group in the form of the IRGC who are willing to go to great lengths to defend the regime, even against their own citizens. Here's a question from John Q. Adams in 28. How was Khamenei chosen as supreme leader when he wasn't an Ayatollah? That question is about this gentleman, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and it is true that when he was chosen to be supreme leader to succeed Khomeini, he wasn't an Ayatollah. An Ayatollah is a very senior religious cleric in Shia Islam. Shia Islam differs a little bit from Sunni Islam in that if you are a Shia Muslim, you are supposed to pick a very senior Ayatollah as your source of religious knowledge and religious authority. Khamenei, when he was chosen as supreme leader, actually wasn't widely thought of by other Ayatollahs as one of them. And he certainly wasn't thought of as one of the most senior Ayatollahs who has the status of what is called a marja' taqlid, or a source of emulation.
Looking forward to finishing up some work so I can get out and enjoy the weather.
So
Ooh,
why was he
very
selected?
fun.
He was basically
What are your
selected because he'd been
outdoors
president for 8 years,
activities
and he was a
that you like to
regime
engage
insider.
in?
They even
You can tell
changed
I'm
the
not
Iranian
always in the
constitution
outdoors
to make sure
because of how
that
I
he could come to power. The
say that.
rationale then was political and not religious. A natural follow-up question that somebody might ask
is very nice out right
how come
now.
he was succeeded by his son?
In Utah,
This was not
where I'm
like
located.
a monarchy or a dynastic succession. Again, just like with the selection of the father, the selection of the son was political.
It is nice. I was
Mujtaba
just walking in the
Khamenei
woods, picked up
is
some
very
garbage
close to the
from the floods.
IRGC.
Wow.
The IRGC, the Islamic
That's amazing.
Revolutionary
Good
Guard
for
Corps,
you.
are the kingmakers in Iran today.
On behalf of the
Wonderful
earth,
Fox
thank you for doing that.
7959 asks, Iran has major
Because
protests
I
every
can
few
speak for the
years, yet
earth.
nothing happens.
I
Why?
got a
Iranians
certificate.
do often protest their regime.
That
In
sounds delightful,
2009, for example,
walking
you
in
had
the
something
woods.
called the Green Revolution, where Iranians, particularly young people, took to the streets to protest an election that was rigged against a moderate reformist presidential candidate and in favor of a conservative presidential candidate named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Ever since 2017, the Iranians have basically had one protest a year. And some of those protests are about economic issues, but some of them are about political issues. One of the big ones happened in 2022. It was called the Women, Life, and Freedom protest. And that was after a young Iranian woman named Mahsa Amini was killed by the religious police for not wearing her headscarf properly. So what happens to all these protests? The main thing is that they get repressed brutally by the regime's thugs. It's difficult to exaggerate just how willing the Islamic Republic's regime is to mete out violence against its citizens. But another factor also that ends up maybe mitigating some of the protest is that Iran does have elections. It has elections for parliament and it has elections for president. And sometimes in these elections for the presidency, moderates get elected. And so sometimes that soaks some of the energy for reform. People channel it into voting for a candidate that they think can change things. For example,
Certainly
the current
not.
president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, is just such
Good
a
for you.
reformist candidate. But here's something I know for a fact. Iranians are going to continue to protest. And when
What
this
floods
war ends,
happened?
protest in Iran
If you
will
aren't
not.
comfortable saying
Taylor
like
Pink
where,
asks, what's
that's
one
fine.
thing about the current Iran war that most people are completely misunderstanding? One of the things about this war is that it's as much an information war as it is a war on the battlefield. And in the information war, the battle space is actually a lot more level. The Iranians have access to all of the tools that we might have access to. They can make glitzy AI videos that make it look like they are scoring dramatic battlefield victories. And they can also make really arresting viral propaganda videos. They made this one video called One Vengeance for All, in which they presented themselves as getting revenge for all of the victims of American aggression, going all the way back to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even to the...
Yeah, I have to say, Iranian AI resistance, when it comes to, like, some in the US view it as propaganda, which, I mean, it can be, but how they are framing the US in all of these videos, it really is correct. So I'm glad that they're talking about all of the US imperialist aggression throughout history. Dressed in black? Indeed. I have a bowler hat today because I'm a queer theater kid. Welcome. How are you doing?
Genocide against Native Americans. And one of the reasons that the information battle space is much more even is not just because the Iranians can also use all the AI tools that we use, but that the soldiers in the information battlefield are not just necessarily located in Iran. Basically anybody who's unhappy with this war can make a viral video and circulate it online and then get boosted by their networks. We have to
I guess it could be worse as well.
Believing what we see on the internet about what's happening.
I'll do my best to provide some entertainment.
Thing I would say that people are misunderstanding about this war is that the regime could survive this bombardment and President Trump could make a deal with them that would allow them to come out and wave the flag.
We met our subscriber goal,
bombing campaign,
so that's
the great
cool.
Satan and the little Satan, the two greatest
that.
air forces in the world.
So
but they could still lose.
Good in that respect,
the
for
Iranian
sure.
people have protested this regime in the past, and it may be that the capabilities of the regime, and particularly of the IRGC, will have been so degraded after this war that the balance of power between the people on the street and the regime shifts in the people's favor. The last thing I would say that people should pay a little bit more attention to is the fact that when we started this war by assassinating the supreme leader of Iran, we really crossed into some uncharted territory. And it remains to be seen whether that ends up being a good thing for the United States by making our rivals more compliant and pliable, or a bad thing by making our leaders less safe and us less safe. Okay, Breadfruit 4005 asks, what do you think is actually the best future for Iran? Americans typically think that the best future for any country is for them to have a liberal, multi-party democracy like we have. And after our
but what do Americans know about
Iraq and Afghanistan,
what is good for other places and governing?
That said, I really do think that in Iran, the best outcome is a democracy. It's not just the best for them, it's something that I do think the Iranians would actually be able to sustain. It's a real tragedy that the images that we see of Iranians tend to be of these bearded clerics with very stern faces, because that is a very deep and rich and sophisticated society. It has a very high rate of literacy.
5,000
There's
years
a very high rate
it's been
of
around.
education for women in Iran. Indeed, by some accounts, women achieve more educational attainment than men in Iran.
Sometimes I like to link
there's lots of reasons to believe that if the Iranians got the chance to lift the boot of the IRGC and the Islamic Republic off their neck, they'd be able to build a democracy and to keep a democracy. And that democracy wouldn't just be good for the Iranian
happen to think
people,
of
it would also
anyone,
be really good
I'm
for the world.
definitely open
I
to
cannot
that.
exaggerate how extraordinary the Persian people are. You know, the Persians who come to the United States have made enormous contributions. The first woman to win a Fields Medal in mathematics, which is like the Nobel Prize for math, was an Iranian woman who won it in 2014 named Miriam Mirzakhanian. There are major Iranian engineers
she's stunning.
and architects and string
Holy
theorists.
shit.
This is a society that has made enormous contributions to science and technology and to human civilization. And you can't help but think that if somehow the Iranians could be liberated from an oppressive regime and also from a situation in which the world's greatest superpower squeezes them, that the benefits to them and to the world civilization would
they're
be
constantly being
You know, there's this
attacked
poem by the Persian
by
poet
the
Rumi. I've only read
aircraft
it in
carrier
translation, I
of
don't
the
speak
world's
Persian,
largest
but something like,
superpower,
somewhere
Israel.
out there, beyond ideas of right and wrong and good and evil, there's a field. I will meet you there. I really hope that
I'm gonna
field
search a
exists,
Twitch
and I
channel
really
with
hope
I
that
love
sooner rather
Trump.
than later, the Iranian people
No,
and the
don't
American
do
people
it.
can
Don't do
I
it.
think only good things will happen. So
I
those are all
think
the
Zach,
questions we have for
yeah,
today.
yeah,
Thank you
Zach's
for
rated a
watching
few
Tech
times.
Support Iran.
Zach makes some really great content. Very smart, focused on education. I really love his streams. Highly recommend if you already do not follow and subscribe to Zach. Okay, I wanted to watch this about Ambedkar by Dr. Shashi Tharoor because Ambedkar often gets forgotten in Western discourse, at least when talking about India and liberation, that there is this constant uplifting of Gandhi and erasure of Ambedkar. And this is because Ambedkar was for much more progressive policies and philosophies that were for actual liberation and elimination of caste. And Gandhi often gets credit for things and that he did not necessarily stand for. So he has a complex history, but I'm very excited to watch this because I have been wanting to watch it for a bit, but now we're going to do it on a stream. Yep, love Zach. That's how I ended up here. Oh, very fun. From what I remember, I think that might be how you also ended up here, Junk Saint. I used to say his name Zach Chap. Would it just be Zach App? Now I just say Zach. I don't know. What do you all say? Okay, how long is this gonna start?
Who is a former international civil servant, everyone. I'm Roger Mosey, the Master of Selwyn. It's nice to see such a big crowd here tonight in the Quarry White House auditorium.
Big crowd.
And even more people joining us online, so you are equally welcome too. Thank you for being there. And it's a special delight tonight to welcome our speaker, Shashi Tharoor, who is a former international civil servant, a diplomat, a politician, writer, and public intellectual, and one of the best-known figures in India. Now, he's here because he's written an excellent book about
Zach Chap.
Ambedkar,
Okay,
with the
so
subtitle,
I wasn't
Man Who
alone
Gave
in
Hope
that.
to India's Dispossessed. Now, I think it's fair to acknowledge straight away that many of you
I feel
heard
validated.
a lot
Thank
about
you.
Ambedkar as one of the great men of 20th century India, and his incredible journey from what was described in those times.
Oh, I need to step out for a sec. I'm gonna keep this playing, but I'll be right back.
And influential figures of his
I always say
generation.
Zach App.
And this being Cambridge, we have
See,
many
we're
distinguished experts
split.
in our audience
Maybe we
tonight.
need to ask
But
Zach.
others may not have heard
That
of
would
him at
help.
all, which would certainly not be the case with other leaders such as Gandhi or Nehru. And quite a number of colleagues here at Selwyn were educated into Ambedkar's significance by this event happening and by the book. And that may be one of the themes we discuss, why this disparity. We may want to explore that tonight. And emphatically, as a non-expert myself, I'm going to leave the questioning mainly to our audience. If you're online, you can email a question. I've put it to Shashi, master@sel.cam.ac.uk. That's master@sel.cam.ac.uk. Or otherwise, we will test our throw microphone and bring in people here in the auditorium. And finally, for me, there is a Selwyn connection with tonight's event. David Davidine, an honorary fellow of the college, together with his colleague Dr. Roger von Svanenberg, who's director of the Pluto Educational Trust, they are here tonight, and they were involved in the commissioning of the Manchester University Press series entitled Global Icons, of which this book is the very first, Shashi tells me. And they're particularly interested in Dr. Ambedkar since the majority of Indians, more than 2 million, who were shipped in the 19th century as indentured labourers to the Caribbean, Fiji, South Africa, Mauritius and elsewhere, were Dalits and from the lowest castes. And Selwyn is happy to announce a 5-year programme of visiting bi-fellowships in indentureship studies, which will start next week with the appointment of Professor Gyotra Bahadur. And these fellowships will, we believe, be the first such at any university worldwide. And we acknowledge the role the Amina Ghaffur Institute has played in making those fellowships a reality. We thank Ramesh and Leela Narain this year, and Tulsi Dayal and Claudette Singh next year for their additional support. But now let's get straight underway with tonight's event. And Shashi is going to speak for maybe 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, about the book and why he wrote it. And then we're going to start asking questions, and I'd appreciate it if you get your questions ready. So, Dr. Tharoor.
Thank you so much, Master. Am I audible, clear? Thank you so much for those kind words of introduction. I just put online while you were talking on Twitter that people can follow this online, but I didn't have a link to tweet to them.
We'll get it sent to you.
If somebody can do that, I might add the link to the tweet later. However, let me first of all add my word of thanks to Professor David Davidine, who's here, and who has been kind enough to be instrumental in getting this book off the ground and getting Manchester University Press to commission it, and who, along with the Amina Ghafoor Institute, the Pluto Educational
That is such a
Trust,
cute emote.
and of course,
The little
gracious
laughing
Master
bear.
of Selwyn College and his staff are responsible for me being here with all of you this afternoon. Well, the first question I'm often asked about this book, or the first questions I'm often asked about the book, are why Ambedkar and why now? It is, of course, tempting to reply, read the book and find out, but I prefer to respond by informing my questioners of two facts, of which even most Indians are unaware. First, that there is no Indian of whom more statues have been erected across the length and breadth of India than Ambedkar, barring perhaps Mahatma Gandhi. Second, when in 2000...
See, but I didn't know that fact, that there are that many statues of him. That's for a good reason.
12, two respected television channels conducted a poll to name the greatest Indian of all time. Over 20 million voters participated and resoundingly picked Ambedkar ahead of everyone else, including the giants of contemporary Indian history that the Master mentioned. So arguably, there is no more important figure in contemporary India after Mahatma Gandhi than Dr. Ambedkar. In addition to the ubiquitous statues and busts of him everywhere, there are also more observances of his life and legacy than anyone else's. His posthumous stature has grown enormously. A controversial figure in his own lifetime who lost more elections than he won and attracted both opprobrium and admiration in equal measure. Today, he is almost beyond criticism. All Indian political parties seek to lay claim to his legacy. Yet he's not as well known to general readers, particularly abroad, as he deserves to be. There's a vast amount of material, much of it generated by the man himself, whose copious output is estimated at some 17,500 odd pages. In fact, he's probably the only famous figure who published books after he died, because when he died, slumped on his desk, having finished the last words of the book he was working on, the Buddha and his Dhamma, they found so many other manuscripts on his desk that 4 more books were published after being
So prolific.
That's how prolific he was. But a concise distillation of his life and messages are harder to find.
See?
And I thought a short, accessible biography, particularly for the non-specialist reader, that summarizes all the events of his life and critically analyzes his impact on India and beyond, seeks, therefore, to fulfill an important gap. It's difficult
grateful
today
that
to imagine
people
the scale of what
have
Dr.
published
Babasaheb
these things that he
Ambedkar
written
accomplished.
posthumously.
To be born into a so-called untouchable family in 1891, and that too as the 14th and last child of a poor Dalit subedar, a sergeant, or in fact a sort of sub-sergeant,
14th
a non-commissioned
child.
officer in an army cantonment, would normally have
Untouchable
guaranteed
is
a life of
the
neglect,
lowest
poverty,
caste
discrimination,
in
and
Indian
obscurity. His father,
society,
in any case, was on the verge of retirement. But not only did
where
Ambedkar
people
rise
are
above the circumstances
very
of his birth,
limited
but he
in
achieved a
what they
level
can
of
do,
success that would have been
where
spectacular
they
for a
can
child of
go,
privilege. One of the
what
first
kind
untouchables
of
ever
access
enter
to
an Indian college.
resources
He became a
and
professor at the
dignity
prestigious
that's
Sydney
offered
College
in
and a
society.
principal of no less an institution than Bombay's Government Law College, in those days considered the top law college in the country. One of the earliest Indian students in the United States, he earned multiple doctorates from the Columbia University and the University of London, earning advanced qualifications in economics, politics, and law. He was admitted to the bar at Gray's Inn. An heir to millennia of discrimination, he was admitted to the bar, as I said, at Gray's Inn, became India's James Madison as a chair of the Constitution Drafting Committee of the Constituent Assembly. The descendant of illiterates, he wrote a remarkable number of books whose content and range testified to an eclectic mind and a sharp, if provocative, intellect. An insignificant infant scrabbling in the dust of Mao, the small cantonment town, in 1891, became the first law minister of Free India in 1947 in the most impressive cabinet ever assembled in New Delhi. When he died in 1956, aged only 65, Ambedkar had accumulated a set of distinctions few have matched. He had successfully challenged millennia-old discrimination against Dalits, the untouchables, or the depressed classes, as the British call them, instituted the world's oldest, largest, farthest-reaching affirmative action program for his people and entrenched it in the Constitution, guaranteeing not only equality of opportunity, but of outcomes, so there are reserved seats in government jobs and universities and medical colleges and in Parliament and state assemblies for people of the scheduled castes and tribes, promoted liberal constitutionalism in a traditionally illiberal society, managed a balance between individual agency for India's citizens and collective affirmative action for its most marginalized communities, and articulated the most cogent and enduring case for the principles and practices of democracy in a country emerging from imperial rule. Only one distinction remained: India's highest civilian honor, the Bharat Ratna. And when this was finally awarded in 1990, the only question raised by commentators was why it had taken so long. Ambedkar's was therefore a monumental life, and his towering achievements were made despite suffering and enduring humiliations that might have been enough to crush the spirit of a lesser man or turn him into a destructive force. Denied permission to sit at a desk or chair like his other classmates at school, and obliged to learn his lessons from a gunny sack on the floor near the door, which no one would touch because he was sitting on it, and once thrashed for daring
Because
to
this
open
is
a
what it
water
means
tap
to be
at school
untouchable,
when he was
Dalit.
thirsty, since his touching the water tap was deemed polluting. Ambedkar still achieved academic excellence, winning scholarships for higher studies abroad and earning multiple doctorates in an era where even upper caste men wrote BA failed after their names to show they had got that far. Returning to the service of the Maharaja, who had sponsored his studies abroad, he found no one in the city of Baroda willing to rent an abode to an untouchable, resorted to deception, was found out and thrown into the street. Sitting in a park at night with his papers and certificates strewn around him, he wept bitterly and quit the prestigious job that he had earned on merit. Rising from such humiliations to become the most consequential political and social reformer of a glittering generation of freedom fighters was Ambedkar's triumph. And yet many feel posterity is yet to get the measure of the man. History, wrote the novelist Arundhati Roy, has been unkind to Ambedkar. First it contained him, then it glorified him. It made him India's leader of the untouchables, the king of the ghetto. It is.
Wait, Arundhati Roy, what did he say about her?
He wept bitterly and quit the prestigious job that he had earned on merit. Rising from such humiliations to become the most consequential political and social reformer of a glittering generation of freedom fighters was Ambedkar's triumph. And yet many feel posterity is yet to get the measure of the man. History, wrote the novelist Arundhati Roy, has been unkind to Ambedkar. First it contained him, then it glorified him. It made him India.
Oh, okay. So this is, he's not saying that she has been unkind to him, but that history has been unkind to Ambedkar. Because I was like, I thought she liked him. She's great.
Leader of the untouchables, the king of the
An
ghetto.
amazing writer.
It has hidden away his writings. It has stripped away the radical intellect and the searing insolence, unquote. It is indeed largely true that whereas some of those who seek to stand on Ambedkar's shoulders today acknowledge his role in fighting discrimination against Dalits, and others honor his constitution making, they do not engage with the totality of his political and economic vision. Ambedkar's concerns and doubts about Indian democracy
captions are
and his leftist
racist,
view of political
but we
economy
already
and
knew
labor
this.
rights are usually conveniently overlooked by his professed admirers. They prefer instead to do exactly what he warned against, to worship him as an idol, an act of bhakti, rather than the critical engagement that he would have welcomed. Reviewing Ambedkar's colossal achievements requires us to neither restrict him to his role as the great emancipator of India's Dalits, nor to glorify him as a saint above criticism, but rather to embrace his life and his ideas as a whole, the activism and the politics, the triumphs and the failures that marked his extraordinary impact on India's public consciousness. My book, therefore, tries to offer a reinterpretation of his life and legacy. He died at 65. This book was written 65 years later, seeing his passing as an inflection point, a midpoint in the story of his life, because the legacy has outlived him and will continue to do so. I do feel that it would be wrong to reduce the life of this extraordinary Indian to just one issue, his championship of the Dalit cause, just as much as it would be wrong to gloss over his path-making role in that monumental endeavor. So I would like you, if you are going to read my book, and certainly in the course of tonight's discussion, to appreciate his contributions as a constitutionalist and a builder of democracy, in addition to his role as a social iconoclast, and engage with his ideas and battles for the principles for which he stood. These include his fundamental critique of Hindu society and its practice of the caste system, or varnashrama dharma, whose annihilation he called for in terms that alarmed those who wanted to overcome untouchability without disturbing the existing social order. His conversion to Buddhism in the last year of his life, and his exhortation to others to follow his example. His emphasis on constitutional morality as a means of sinking liberal roots into an illiberal society.
Which, his conversion to Buddhism is also more of a political statement in resistance to Hindu nationalism.
His revival
embedded
of the idea of fraternity,
in
not merely
Indian
in its
government and
French
society.
revolutionary sense, but as an authentic Indian idea, traceable to the Buddha and the early Buddhist Sanghas. And his astonishing intellectual fecundity in taking on issues as diverse as provincial taxation in British India, the challenges and advantages of dividing India into linguistically organized states, and the case for Pakistan. It also acknowledges his occasionally intemperate language, his ungraciousness to Mahatma Gandhi, whom he saw as his nemesis, and his unwillingness to suffer fools gladly or to make the concessions and compromises so necessary to get along in a largely hostile world. It's important to realize, by the way, in a university setting like Selwyn College, that Ambedkar was not only an economist of the highest quality. Amartya Sen, India's only Nobel Prize-winning economist, was to hail him as the father of his own economics, and a legal scholar of rare distinction, but also a pioneering social anthropologist, whose 1916 paper on caste at a conference in Columbia was arguably the first serious academic study of the origins and practice of the caste system in India. Ambedkar was also modern India's first male feminist.
First male feminist, yeah. I think many people would agree with that he's the first modern male feminist. He understood that it wasn't just about Dalit liberation, with untouchable liberation, the lowest class, that there were all of these systems of oppression functioning that also were oppressing Dalit people, but women, queer people, Hidra people, which is a third gender in Indian society, many Desi societies. That's what I identify as. And that he understood that liberation has to be collective, because this is how oppression works. It is a sprawling, institutionalized concept that forces people to be marginalized at the and this is because of the ruling class and people on top, so they can have these feelings of superiority and feeling like they have more resources available and to be hoarding them.
His speeches and legislative interventions and initiatives on women's rights nearly 90 years ago to a century ago would be considered honestly radical, even today, at least progressive in a political leader even today in India. As a legal thinker, his emphasis on individual agency and his understanding of the true meaning of effective representation in a democracy are key to the constitutional system that has been established and entrenched over the last three-quarters of a century. As a social reformer, Ambedkar's emphasis on education as the passport to social advancement and economic empowerment for subalterns continues to resonate in today's India. The very idea of Indianness, so brilliantly articulated by Jawaharlal Nehru and his acolytes, was infused with an extra dimension when viewed through Ambedkar's lens of social justice for those who have been oppressed and marginalized for millennia. Finally, in the tension between Mahatma Gandhi's vision of India and Ambedkar's, it is fair to say that it's the latter's vision that endures, codified in the Constitution of the Republic. And that vision is his finest legacy. In the perennial tension between communitarian privileges and individual rights, Ambedkar stood squarely on the side of the individual. In the battle between timeless traditions and modern conceptions of social justice, Ambedkar tilted the scales decisively towards the latter. In the contestation between the wielders of power and the drafters of law, Ambedkar carved a triumphant place for enabling change through democracy and legislation. In a fractured and divided Hindu society, he gave the Dalits a sense of collective pride and individual self-respect and empowerment. In so doing, he transformed the lives of millions yet unborn, heaving an ancient civilization into the modern era through the force of his intellect and the power of his pen. The journey does continue, and this is not a comprehensive account of this rich and well-documented life, but I hope to have stimulated the curiosity of enough people who will read a short book and then perhaps be interested enough to delve into much more that awaits them in his own words and the more detailed biographies that unfortunately find fewer and fewer readers in the TikTok generation. I do feel that Ambedkar's life and legacy are far too consequential for Indians and those interested in India not to be aware of, and I'm hoping that this book and our conversations about it will serve as a contribution to building that awareness.
I think more people are open to reading than what they even expect, which is one of the reasons why I like talking about books on this stream, doing literature story time, to expose people to more books, because I love books. I love having physical books, things that I can touch, which many people now are referring to as analog. And I'm like, that's just real life to me, which is such a boomer thing for me to say. Really? Do you? Exactly. This is a mystery. No one knew this before. But I think people just need to be exposed to books more. Isn't that hardware? What does that mean? I'm not sure what you mean. But yeah. Oh, that called hardware. Isn't that hardware? Yeah. Hardware. Analog books. Yeah. I guess they could be considered that too. That is so funny. Yeah, I think more people are interested in books. It's just a matter of like being exposed to it, which also can be a class thing and access to libraries and stuff.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to our exchanges.
So, Shashi, you know better than most that India is a vigorous democracy. You are not a member, it's fair to say, of Prime Minister Modi's party. How do you end up being a hero to everybody?
Oh, I'm not sure I am.
I was meaning Ambedkar. I mean, you as well. I mean, it's fine. I'm happy.
Oh, you mean how does he end? Oh, well, of course. He's
What? I also understood that he was talking about him. That was a weird way to say that.
Ended up being a hero to everybody because of a combination, I think, of social awareness that's changing and a certain political opportunism. It is simply not possible for any political party today to seem to be negative about or insulting about a man who's seen as an icon by 15 to 18% of the population to begin with, and to be seen as being on the right side of history by the bulk of the rest. And so even parties representing political tendencies that were critical of Ambedkar in his lifetime, or that he was critical of when they were originated in the Indian political space, even they have chosen to adopt at least a lip service to his life and his ideals. So he's really beyond contestation. There are two statues in front of the old Parliament. The new Parliament, I haven't been yet to see it since my party boycotted its inauguration. But the two statues, the two people honored in front of the old Parliament were Mahatma Gandhi and Ambedkar. These are the two now who are seen as being really beyond debate.
And of course, growing up in an era of empire,
just to provide a little bit of context, so he mentioned Narendra Modi. He's the current prime minister of India. He is extremely corrupt. He is extremely bigoted and Islamophobic. His rise to power largely had to do with him radicalizing Hindus in Gujarat. That is the state in India where my family is from, that I still have family living there, and that they expelled Muslims in a very violent way. So he was a very big supporter of Hindu nationalism and ingratiating even more religion and the government so that there is essentially no separation. He is part of the Bharatiya Janata Party. And it's good to hear that this gentleman, Dr. Shashi, is not part of his party because it's overtly fascist.
I was one of the people to whom the Ambedkar story came dismayingly as something relatively new to me. Mm-hmm. There was a degree to which he did work with the British more than some did, because the key thing was emancipation. The key thing was social reform.
So that's true. And, it's important to understand that he has been attacked he was attacked in his own lifetime for not being associated with the Indian nationalist movement. He kept himself apart from it, and he was willing to accept office under the British, including the highest position in the country, the Viceroy's Executive Council, during World War II, when the bulk of the nationalist opposition was in jail. And there were enough criticisms of it. In fact, there's a fairly controversial book published as late as 1999 by a man who was then a minister in the BJP government called Worshipping False Gods, which was a 770-page attack on Ambedkar for having collaborated.
BJP government is that party I just mentioned.
The British. So you've got that strain of thought.
Government ruled by that party.
It was absolutely clear. He said, it's all very well to speak about fighting for freedom, but whose freedom? If you're going to fight for the freedom of the upper caste and the privileged castes in hierarchical society, then you're actually going to probably entrench the discrimination and suffering of my own people. So social emancipation first. Mahatma Gandhi's counter was, we have to keep ourselves united in order to win freedom and not divide ourselves, which will undermine the cause of freedom. And once we got freedom, we'll solve this problem. But that was where the two of them first disagreed, and there were other disagreements as well. So on this issue, he was unabashed about this. And it is to be said, however, to the credit of Mahatma Gandhi and the nationalists, that despite that, they extended an offer to him to join the first cabinet, even though he was not a member of the Congress party and had been associated with positions of office under the British.
Now, I'm going to bring in the audience in just a moment, but one of the things, obviously, your own stature as a politician is unquestioned, but one of the things you point to in the book, and you mentioned it in your talk just now, was that the cabinet at the start of India being an independent nation was amazing and had spectacular people in it. And you really draw a bit of a narrative about the decline in politics. Of course, every country does. I mean, every country thinks that politicians now are not as good as they were
once upon a time.
But do you think there has been that decline? Is there
You can see
sense
my
that the
technique.
generation really had greatness, which it's
I have
hard
the
to achieve now?
space
Well,
taped off,
one good thing that
so I
has
know
happened
where
is
it goes.
increased democratization. That is that first cabinet consisted of an elite. The Constituent Assembly from which it was largely drawn was itself elected by very limited franchise. The British had grudgingly, granted us limited franchise in the course of the first half of the 20th century, a little more, doling out a little more each time. But as late as 1946, the last elections the British ran in India, in a country then of 330 million people, only 30 million were eligible to vote. So we're talking about a very limited electorate. And so there was a perception that this was very much an elite, highly educated establishment. But within that, there were people of tremendous talent and ability. What has happened since then is there's been a democratization of politics, and we've had people from much more humble and rustic and rural backgrounds coming up and rising to power and eminence. There's also been, and the two are not necessarily connected, there's also been a decline in quality. 33%, for example, of our parliament has are people with criminal charges against them, and not just small things, and not petty larceny, but murder and dacoity and banditry and rape and so on. And the fact is that there are a number of people who perhaps are more representative of the overall sort of masses of
Yeah,
India.
there is a lot
but
of
who would not have been
corruption
able to
in the
hold
Indian
their,
government.
to hold their own and debate with any of the people in that cabinet. So that's the sort of
This tends to happen, especially when nations where people first receive or fight for independence, that you have all of these other actors, largely Western powers, who have a vested interest in destabilizing these new independent nations or groups of people, that they then put people in who are corrupt. And that is the same with India. And how when you have these empires exit a place, when they're forced out, they leave so much chaos behind them that it's like that is then setting the scene for people to build off of. And what we have to remember is when we're talking about places like this, places that are often referred to as like third world countries or underdeveloped, it's not that they're underdeveloped. It's that they have been ransacked for resources and colonized, and that there have been societies that have existed there that are, very sophisticated and functioning, and that empire and colonization created all of that chaos.
difference that one does see in terms of a decline in quality. But there is something to be said for the fact that in every country, spreading the principle of representation to all levels is extremely important. And, eventually that should result in an improvement in quality too.
Okay, I'm trying to work out whether the figure of people facing convictions in Britain is higher or lower than 33%.
I'm afraid it probably
I would
isn't.
like to go to the audience to ask questions. If you are watching at home, do email master@cell.cam.act.uk, and I'll put your question there. But we have this microphone over here, which
I guess
whizzes
this
around the
was
audience. You just have to go to
2
catch
years
it.
ago.
Hassan, I can see that
Just for
this is
context.
sort of almost the back row in the middle, very inconveniently. Yeah, Hassan, can you just wave your arm again so Georgia can see you? Right.
Ready to cut.
Yeah, we almost took out a member of the road.
That's
right. Oh, right, okay.
That's a great system.
Okay, your question, yes.
Should I stand up? Or is that...
No, don't. But just speaking to the top of the box would be great.
All right, is that okay?
That's
Can
great.
you hear me okay? Thanks very much for the amazing talk. It's always a great learning experience every time I listen to your videos, and it's a great...
Thank you. Do tell me what you're studying, where you're from, and so on.
I'm Shaista. I'm from Gilgit, Baltistan.
Yes.
And I'm doing a PhD studying brain development.
Didn't you say hello to me at the JLF in London?
No,
that's another Shaista. All right, sorry, go ahead.
It's a different person.
So I met another Shaista from Gilgit in London 2 days ago, so that's very
Oh, wow,
interesting.
that's incredible.
Small world.
Yeah. So it's not a question really. It's more just a thought, and I was curious to know what you think about it. I was curious to know what you think.
Thank you
about
for
the
being
role of
here.
class
It
as
was
a
good
unifying
chatting with
force
you.
in the rights movements across communities in India, which are very strong.
Yeah,
religious
you need your
identities, And I
sleep.
say this in the context
Do
of,
that.
for example,
Take care of
would a
yourself,
Muslim
please.
community be willing to vote for a working class?
It was good
Dalit
seeing
leader
you.
compared to an upper class Muslim leader. And what do you think that says about a shared Indian identity?
It's a fascinating question, excellent question. Thank you. Well, first of all, the issue came up in Ambedkar's lifetime, in his quarrel with the
Thank you.
communists.
You don't need to
there was a lot he agreed
apologize.
on with
I
Marxist
appreciate you being
doctrines. For
here.
example, he believed in wanting to nationalize a lot of the
Bye.
economy, manufacturing, and so on. But he disagreed with the communists and their emphasis on class, because he said class completely overlooked the social reality of caste. And so we had the extraordinary spectacle of the then Marxist leader, E.M.S. Namboodiripad, disparaging Ambedkar, saying, why is he distracting the nation on the trivial issue of Harijan rights? Harijan was the term then that Gandhi had come up for the Dalits, of Harijan rights, when we've got far more important issues to fight for the working class and for the freedom of our country. So that was a disagreement in their lifetime. But curiously enough, the labor movement and the communist parties in India did well for a while. In the 50s and 60s, they won seats in many places, precisely with people cutting across religious and other lines to vote on the basis of class. They were effective at unionizing workers beyond issues of religion, for example, or caste, and getting them to vote. What's interesting is that
There are quite a lot of
time when there were
Maoists
many parts of
in
India
India,
in which the communists practically
especially
had
among the
stranglehold on certain
Dalit
seats, so there was a strong
caste.
unionized labor presence. All of those now have gone from their grasp. And in fact, geographically, they've now become essentially a regional party from my state of Kerala. They've been pretty much wiped out everywhere else in the country. Whereas religious-based and caste-based political mobilization has only gained in strength since then. And what we're seeing now is that caste has...
Yes. And that is with this rise in Hindutva, Hindu nationalism that is very fascist. Kerala, this state that he is from, that he mentioned, has more freedoms. Their government, their local government, is more accepting when it comes to other religions. It doesn't mean that there still isn't Hindu nationalism that is instituted, but there are a lot more freedoms for people there.
Become an instrument of getting people together. For example, the Dalit community has a very strong political party called the BSP, the Bahujan Samaj Party, which has made its leader, Mayawati, chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, our largest state, 200 million people, 3 times. And that's because of leveraging the power of numbers through the ballot box into actual office. Whereas, as I say, the communists have been seeing a sort of secular electoral decline throughout. In principle, you could argue that there is this basis, but somehow the potency of that sort of appeal in the Indian political space has gone down over the years, whereas other kinds of appeal have gone up. I mean, there are a couple of parties, for example, of the Muslim community. They happen to be more regionally based, but they very strongly and overtly appeal to Muslim voters and Muslim interests. One in Kerala, one in Hyderabad, and one in Assam, who are open about the fact that they seek to represent Muslim interests. There are even smaller fringe parties, but these 3 are fairly significant ones, and they've had people elected to parliament as well as to state assemblies. You've got people, the Sikhs, they don't all vote for the Akali Dal, but the Akali Dal is overtly a Sikh party. You've got similar groupings, not so effectively perhaps of others. What you don't have is an effective sort of purely working class party, or for that matter, even a purely upper class party. There's no party that sort of just stands up for the elites and the business community and the titans of industry, as a party like the Swatantra Party did between 1959 and 73. That too has disappeared. So class interests as an organizing principle versus identitarian interests like caste and religion, I think the balance in the seesaw has tilted very much towards the latter.
Okay, more questions, please. Do you want to throw down to the end of the row there? Just wave your arm, that'd be great. Oh, 2 goes. Yes, please.
Hi, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
Sure. Would you hold it up slightly higher?
Okay.
There we go.
I'm Shri. I'm doing an MPhil in development studies here, and I'm from the...
That's the mic? That is so strange. Okay. This color looks lovely on her.
United States.
You're from?
The United States.
Okay.
And so I was wondering, how has your own caste and experience with caste relations influenced your decision to write this book, and how you approached writing this book?
Well, you know, I was
That's a good
born
question.
To nationalist parents. My father had dropped his caste surname in college. In school, he wore it with pride. I could see his school books with Tharoor Chandrasekharan Nair, TCS Nair written on some of his school books. But he dropped the Nair because Mahatma Gandhi had said that, caste is not a good thing to preserve in independent India and so on. And he
Nair is an
essentially
upper
never mentioned
caste
caste in the household.
name.
So, or religion for that matter. I mean, I went to school in Bombay where we had friends of every religion, every caste coming home to play, and never once did our parents ever mention, oh, that so-and-so, that Muslim boy, or that Hindu boy, or that Sikh boy, or whatever. It never came up. The question didn't arise, and that was what that nationalist generation believed in, that we had to rise above these distinctions that divided us and focus on our unity. The cliched slogan of my childhood was national integration, unity in diversity, that kind of thing. I only even became aware of my caste till much later, and then I had to ask my parents what caste was, what Nair was, and so on. And that was a discovery. But I never let it influence my life, and nobody in my family chose to consciously to sort of remain within caste boundaries when it came to marrying or anything else. I mean, all three of us, I have two sisters and I, married outside our caste. And none of us are particularly concerned about caste when it comes to, in India I can afford to employ a cook. I don't ask him, which community he's from. As long as he can cook well, I don't care. I mean, so I come from a certain caste that, or a certain background, if you like, of being oblivious to caste issues. Having said that, when I came back to India and to Indian politics, I learned very quickly the limitations of that. Number one, I wrote a piece about this and was promptly rebuked by an 18-year-old Dalit blogger, saying, don't you realize that obliviousness to caste is itself something only available to the privileged, and that I, as a Dalit, could never afford to be unaware of my caste.
Yes,
and
exactly.
that kind of shook me. I had not thought of it that way, and it certainly woken up to that very seriously.
Yeah.
And the second...
A lot of privilege, not only is it access to resources and rights, human rights, that other people cannot receive or do not have access to, it is an unawareness of marginalization and issues that people experience. That doesn't mean that people who are privileged in some ways are not in others. Like, for example, within a white supremacist society where colorism exists, like me having lighter skin makes it so that I often can be assumed as white. And there is privilege with proximity to whiteness. But also being Hidra, being a non-binary queer person, that I experience marginalization there. So we all have various privileges and marginalization, but where we have these intersections of marginalization, these are the people who are not able to ignore the marginalization that they experience on a daily basis. That part of privilege means that you just have no comprehension. You are not forced to acknowledge these systems that rank human dignity that you are benefiting from.
Episode of this nature that I had was in my political career as representative, as a member of parliament from Thiruvananthapuram. I had been similarly inclined in recruiting people to my office and so on. I just looked at their merits, their CV, the way they spoke at an interview and so on. I never, ever inquired about their caste. And then I was accused of having stacked my office with people of a particular caste. And I had not even thought about it. So I quickly checked all their castes. And fortunately, the rebuke was wrong. One of them was from an underprivileged caste. But the fact still was that the majority weren't. And I then had to very consciously go out of my way. I mean, I had, in fact, a Muslim and a Christian on the staff. But the Hindus apparently were majority.
It requires a consciousness, deliberate intent
by firing anybody, but by
to decolonize.
The balance. I wouldn't want people to be fired because of the accident of their birth either, especially if they're doing a good job. But I'm just saying, so these are learnings. I think today in Indian politics, you have to be caste conscious. Parties give tickets to candidates with an eye on the caste composition of a particular constituency. Such and such a place in Kerala, you really need a Christian candidate, or in such and such a place, you need a Muslim candidate, or a Dalit candidate, of course, is reserved seats. But then you've got, even between a Nair candidate or an Uyghur candidate, there are questions of population numbers, concentration of voters, and so on. And I never thought that way, and I'm learning that it's impossible. Even if you don't think that way, others who are important to your political life will think that way. So that's the answer. It's not a satisfactory answer because it shows that I came into this in some ways unprepared. But I have learned as I've spent time in this profession.
I'm going to get the microphone to make shorter journeys. So can we go somewhere in the middle? Yes, a gentleman with a beard there. There we go. Whoops.
Whoa, that was quite a throw.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope you don't play American football. This passes. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. My name is Kevin, a fellow Malayali.
Hi.
You wrote a book called Why I Am a Hindu.
Right.
And Ambedkar's views on the matter are fairly clear from Annihilation of Caste and also Riddles in Hinduism, I think, and other texts. So there is a point of difference between your view on the matter and his.
Oh, yes.
Could you please expand on that?
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I wrote Why I'm a Hindu more as a response to the political uses of Hindutva as a political doctrine. To say that, in my view, it was a misrepresentation of what the faith I grew up with is all about. And so I talked about some of the basic philosophical ideas of Hinduism and the ethics of Hinduism as taught to all of us. And certainly, if you've read enough and imbibed enough of Hinduism, you would not be a particular fan of the caste system either. There are episodes I cite,
Yes,
a famous
exactly.
anecdote that many know of the great...
Similar to other religious movements when they are used for political ends, how they are not representative of the actual faith, that there is this bastardization, this twisting of doctrine and philosophy in order to meet these political ends, and how it is not a true representation of what the whole group of people who practice this faith are. We see this with Zionism, we see this with white Christian nationalism. So it's not exclusive to India. This phenomenon exists all over the world.
Hindu sage Adi Shankaracharya, the man who revived Hinduism around the 10th century, who was walking across a narrow bridge in Benares, in Varanasi, with his disciples when a Chandala, that is a Dalit in today's language, was coming the other way. And the disciples brusquely ordered the Dalit to move aside for the great sage. And he stopped. He refused to move. And he said to the sage, "What do you want me to move, my body or my soul? Because don't we both have the same soul?" And it is said that Adi Shankara prostrated himself at the feet of the Dalit and said, "You have understood my teachings better than my own disciples have." I mean, that's the Hindu spirit.
Well,
that ultimately, all of us possess fragments of the same Atman, the same soul, that ultimately we have that in common with all living creatures, including even plants and trees and animals, and that ultimately the purpose, the search, the quest of the soul is to attain ultimately merger with the Brahman, the divine Godhead, the ultimate cosmic consciousness. That sort of idea does not really permit of distinctions based on birth and so on. But society and the social evolution of society is sometimes different from what the religion and the philosophy teaches. And that's where the challenge has arisen. Now, I don't disagree with Ambedkar on the need to reject the caste system. I personally have not practiced caste, as I explained in response to the earlier question, and therefore I don't see any particular merit in it. It may have made sense as a profession-based categorization in more traditional rural society many, many years ago, centuries ago. But in today's modern world, it makes no sense at all. As Ambedkar rather brusquely pointed out, when Gandhiji said that Varnashrama Dharma was part of the core element of Hindu societies, in that case, why aren't you practicing the profession of the caste you were born into? He was born into a merchant caste, a Banya caste, and there he was doing politics. So, I mean, the point is that it ultimately did become somewhat absurd as a proposition to suggest that all the elements of the caste system were still applicable in the 20th century. And to that degree, I agree with Ambedkar. Where I disagree with him was both on his complete rejection of Hinduism as a whole, where he completely overlooked the existence of these liberal and inclusive trends in Hindu philosophy and thought, as well as the examples of teachers, preachers, reformers, people of very many different faiths, very many different castes who...
I agree with that. Like, actual Hinduism that is not whitewashed by colonization, that is not fascistic because of Hindu nationalism. It is extremely queer. It's very feminist in a lot of ways. Like, there are two female goddesses who have a child together. Krishna is constantly changing avatars, like, on Earth into different genders as well, where it's like this idea of gender fluidity, transness, gender expansiveness, that it is a way to understand other people's experiences and can be viewed as holy. So, like, of course, all of these systems of oppression don't want people to have this kind of insight in being like, wow, we respect each other's genders and understand that there is value in seeing each other's perspectives. It's like, yeah, they are not encouraging that.
Who stood for the faith over the centuries. And he gave them short shrift. And some of his comments were quite truly intemperate. I've quoted one in the book in particular where he said, there might be a better or worse Hindu, but a good Hindu there cannot be. I mean, that kind of language I thought was needlessly intemperate because it overlooked so much that Hinduism did have to offer. And to that degree, I parted company with him.
We're going to the second row here, third along. So can you just wave your arm? And the fawn...
Oh, good catch.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Spot on. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Tharoor.
Hi.
I'm also a fellow Malayali. My name is Nazneen. I'm from Calicut.
Okay.
And I'm doing my MPhil in Population Health Sciences, but my question is very
Not about
unrelated to that. So I guess my question is also related to what Kevin said. Like, it was very interesting to read how critical Ambedkar was of Hinduism and the hierarchies within the religion. But there's been a lot of globalization that's happened. Indians have moved to other parts of the world. So recently in the US, they had the anti-caste bill in California. So I mean, I'm trying to see, like, would that happen in a state like India? Like, I mean, as
it's
a Muslim,
already illegal. The Constitution outlaws untouchability. You cannot discriminate on
right?
that basis.
But at the same time, as a Muslim woman myself, seeing the plight of my community now, don't you think his ask to annihilate?
Yeah, technically, the caste system is eliminated, but in practice, that is a very different thing where people are operating based on these caste distinctions. Like, for example, my family comes from the Brahmin caste, which is the upper caste, and it is the very religious caste. So, like, of course, these people who are in the upper caste are like, yeah, we love Hindu nationalism because they directly benefit from it and want to lord over other people with moral superiority. But so he's kind of showing his hand here of not understanding necessarily the plight of many people who are Muslim in India, that there is rampant discrimination. There's discrimination with all kinds of religion that are not Hinduism, like Christians, Jains, Sikhs, as he was mentioning before, Buddhists. It's like there are so many religions in India. And she is talking about how if we are truly wanting to eliminate caste, that we need to do it not just in name, but also do it in practice.
Is what maybe trickle down to this, like what's happening to other religions in the country.
Yes, I've actually traced, and in a few pages, because the book is meant to be a brief book and a distillation of all these issues, I've actually traced the spreading of Ambedkarite ideas and these ideas to foreign countries. And there's much happening. There's a similar attempt underway in Britain to outlaw caste discrimination. The Seattle Municipal Council has passed a law already, and they have the issue pending in California. And I think, purely on the face of it, adding caste to the kinds of identity disabilities, if you like, that discrimination is based on, I find nothing to complain about in that, because the fact is that just as we say that people should not be discriminated against on the ground of race or the color of their skin or the language they speak or the gender they belong to or the sexual orientation they have or any of those factors, by the same logic, they should not be suffering discrimination because of the caste to which they were born. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with that. The political controversy around this is really not, I think, about the principle of discrimination being bad. It is about the fact that people have tended to see the attempts to outlaw caste discrimination.
Okay. So he still is holding some fairly conservative views, just to point that out, because yes, discrimination on its face is bad. And also how it's implemented is also bad.
As sort of the thin end of a larger anti-Indian, anti-Hindu wedge among sections of the diaspora. And that's why they've become, they've objected to this so much politically. If you see the issue on its own merit, I think it's fine. I think it's nothing particularly problematic. I myself have introduced an anti-discrimination bill as a private member's bill in Parliament, which hasn't gone anywhere, but the idea that it should be illegal to discriminate on any basis, including caste, is, I think, a completely unexceptionable idea.
Okay, loads of hands. Do you just want to go along to the gentleman in the blue shirt? Oh, right, sorry, there were two blue shirts. We've got the microphone here. We'll come to you in a second. Do you want to go?
Hello, Dr. Zarur. I'm Pallav. I'm a postdoc here in the Applied Maths Department.
Little higher.
Pallav, postdoc in Applied Maths Department. Okay. So the question I have is related to the changing landscape of politics and how does Ambedkarite movement keeps on finding or not finding its new meanings. A revolution which saw its peak during the Commonwealth Commission has seen a lot of governments being formed based on these ideas, core beliefs. But as we have sort of moved away from that era, the steam of this movement seems to have sort of been lost. There are a lot of issues, so the question I would ask is, how do you see this movement going forward? And especially in the context of the changing landscape, the current political landscape.
I think it's gaining in strength. Like, I think there's no question that these ideas are spreading not just globally, as the earlier question asked, but also, I think, in terms of depth. And as I said, because the fact is that they've now become politically uncontestable, it's going to be relatively, I think, likely that these ideas will spread and gain in traction rather than disappear. Second, Ambedkar, remember, was not a revolutionary. He was very much a reformer. He believed in the possibility of bringing about change through discussion, debate, and legislation. That was his spirit. In fact, he famously said in a speech that's known now as the Grammar of Anarchy speech of the Constituent Assembly, he said that it was all very well to have satyagrahas and dharnas and hartals and fasts and so on when we were fighting a foreign country. But now that we have found democracy and established it in our Constitution, we have to eschew such habits, or otherwise this would be the Grammar of Anarchy. in our country. So he was not interested in revolutionary change. And so there's some of the more extreme sort of Dalit movements that talked about trying to force change.
I'm further left.
Whereas those who
Have
try to
some
use the power
anarchist
of the ballot box to bring about change,
inclinations.
those would have his approval, I believe. Now, I'm not suggesting that he has triumphed. In fact, I have a couple of quotes in the book from Dalit scholars itemizing the areas of continuing oppression, atrocities, violence, and other problems that Dalits are enduring in many parts of India. There's no doubt that things are better. Certainly in urban India, they're very much better. It's very difficult to discriminate against somebody if you don't know who you're rubbing shoulders with on the bus, or when you go to an office and you're taking orders
You
from a
can tell
Dalit
that
boss.
ideologically
So
he is
people
more
are
aligned
beginning
with
to
Ambedkar
drop
in
that
this way.
consciousness. I mean, there's other ways in which caste preference is practiced, which doesn't quite is not necessarily tantamount to discrimination. The classic example being endogamous marriage. It's a startlingly high percentage of young people who responded in a poll recently that they were still in favor of marrying within their own caste, for example. That's really astonishing. But that doesn't mean they will discriminate against a Dalit colleague at work or not play with a Dalit teammate at cricket or whatever. I mean, you know what I'm saying. There's a difference now between the way in which caste has become a sort of social tool as opposed to caste being a tool of discrimination in many urban settings, in most urban settings. But the practice still exists. It is still entrenched. It is being used for political mobilization. So the struggle will continue for a long time to come.
Okay, we've only got just over 10 minutes left, so I want to get the questions quite short and punchy. So, sir, and then we'll go on the end of that road.
This question
My answers will have to be shorter too.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
This relates to two of the earlier questions, the whole questions of the difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. I presume I agree with you because I don't know what your views are in any detail, but I agree with you when it comes to tolerance and diversity of traditional Hinduism. I think Toynbee made a point of it, which I read before I was a teenager, in The World in the West, where he's looking.
Question, please.
Yeah, so he identifies this diversity, inclusiveness, if you like, of Hinduism. But on the other hand, I think caste became a part of what became evolving Hindu society very early in its history. Yes. So when you talk about reformers, for example, in the 11th century, the Bhakti movement or other reform movements, because of the challenges of Islam and later of Christianity and so on, the very idea of reform suggests that the other thing had become an integral part and a fundamental part of that society.
You're totally right. In fact, Buddha himself started off as a reformer within Hinduism. And Buddha was attacking a Hinduism that was, in many ways, I don't know if you're hearing my... So Buddha himself was a reformer, was attacking a Hinduism that was in many ways ossified, entrenched, hierarchical, excessively ritualistic, and so on. And he succeeded as a result in spreading a very different kind of message, a far more sort of middle-of-the-road way of life that moved society away from temples and into reflective monasteries and that sort of thing. Adi Shankaracharya was actually fighting to revive Hinduism against Buddhism and Jainism. Rather than Islam, which had not taken hold at all in the country at that time. But subsequently, yes, when Islam came and made its advent in the subcontinent, you had the Bhakti movement, you had the emergence of Sikhism, which was an attempt to, you also had the syncretism of Sufism, which came out also from the merging of Hindu traditions with Muslim ones. So you've had all of these things. And I think that if you look back at Ambedkar's sort of choice of Buddhism, that's, it's his to make. But he finds sort of justifications for it, and in some considerable detail in one of his books, in issues that mattered to him through his education and his thought as well. Like, for example, fraternity, which I mentioned in my remarks. The principle of fraternity and brotherhood was what he felt was lacking in Hinduism because a Brahmin would not consider his Dalit fellow Hindu to be a fraternal figure, and that sort of thing. So he wanted to cite Buddhism to also make certain political points. That's the only, otherwise what you said is quite right.
Okay, quick fire. Yes, sir.
Namaskar, Dr. Tharoor. Thanks for talking to us today. And I'm Hitesh. I'm doing MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development. And my question relates to what I'm doing currently. My dissertation focuses on telemedicine and how it can influence access to healthcare services.
Sorry, which medicine did you say?
Telemedicine, telehealth. Yeah.
Do raise it a little bit. I'm losing some of your words.
Yeah. So, and how it can influence or improve health access in remote areas in India.
Sure.
And part of my research question talks about the human connection, and when we talk about access to people, then different criteria comes in play, or dynamics comes in play, and how do you see that technology, when we introduce any new technology, how society respond to that, and what care we should take when we are rolling something like this, a new technology in the society, especially in the areas which is remote and don't have.
Right. I think number one, it's an extremely important thing. It's a good thing. It's necessary. It's positive. Already there have been anecdotes of lives being saved because people were able to consult doctors by Zoom video conferencing calls and so on and get hands-on advice literally while things were happening. I myself inaugurated a service in my state of Kerala, which is an electronically and internet-empowered ambulance where literally the person can be put into an ambulance.
Hello,
which is connected
Aliana.
to
Welcome.
To the specialists in the
This
hospital.
is
And the
a
specialist can actually
bracelet
guide some basic first
that
responder
I'm
treatment, even while the
making.
ambulance is negotiating
These are
its way through
colors
traffic to get
requested
there.
by
So that's again
Night
another way
Nawab.
of telemedicine. There are also, of course,
I
far more
think
important
I'm
challenges of
starting
being
to.
able to teach doctors in
I'm
remote
starting to
areas
do a
by
thing
having
where
access to operations being
subscribers
conducted in big
can
cities and so on. All of this is essential. We are very
request
much in favor.
colors
There's no
for
political
a
divide on this.
bracelet, and I
think,
make
if
it.
you're working on this area, there's plenty of scope for
If you are
growth and development
interested.
of this right across.
Okay, we're going to go to the end row.
How are you
there,
doing?
and to make the microphone throw very difficult, the gentleman in the blue shirt, one row from the back.
Right.
Keep it quick if you can.
Yeah, okay, quickly. Yeah. It's my name, Mr. Turanya. But your talk was excellent. And I must say, jab him because they related the Dr. Ambedkar. My question, but it's before that, then I would like to correct then. Dr. Ambedkar was a reformer, but he's revolutionary as well.
Stressed.
Revolutionary.
What are you
He
stressed
was
about?
Definitely. Yeah, I can't.
If you're
Right,
comfortable
because
saying.
14th October 1956,
I'm sorry you're
when he
stressed.
converted in Buddhism. It was really big revolutionary.
Just
that thing,
existing
and that we call the revolution.
in the
Anyway,
state of the
so my
world,
question is related,
especially
the
as
politics, all politics in
a non-binary
in India,
trans person.
They use the poster and name of the Dr. Ambedkar.
Yes.
But they don't follow his thinking or his thoughts.
Quite right.
But why is that? But probably you know the more than anybody else. So what is that?
Because there's hypocrisy in politics, which is not news, I'm sure, to you. But first of all, when he converted to Buddhism, you'll be
True.
surprised. It didn't create
Hypocrisy in
shockwaves or
politics
revolutionary waves in India.
has
In fact, the
been
biggest voice of the Hindutva movement,
a
the man who
theme
made the
with
concept
human
popular,
beings
V.D.
for
Savarkar,
as long as
welcomed,
human beings have
Ambedkar's
existed.
decision as having kept within the Indic fold that Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism are all Indic religions.
Yeah.
And as far as Savarkar was concerned, they were all Hindus. So he was quite happy. The fear had been that he might go to Islam or Christianity.
Yeah, but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the one big difference between the Hinduism and Buddhism,
Of course, many
Hinduism, they speak about the soul and they connect with the God.
Correct.
But it's Buddhism, they believe in consciousness and they connect with the human
Correct.
rather than the God.
Correct. I agree with you that there are fundamental differences, of which that is one.
Yeah,
But I should tell
sorry.
you that you're right about the hypocrisy,
Yeah.
because as recently as a few months ago,
Yeah.
a minister in the Delhi government of the Aam Aadmi Party
Failing at mutual aiding. My puppy girl is living in an abusive household. Aww. She needs to move out and I can't afford to do it currently. I mean, it's hard when there's only so much you can do, you know? Besides that, she's catatonic right now. She can't help me either, as she is the only accountant in the entire fucking collective. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you both can be able to get her out of that situation. That is really tough. I wouldn't say that you're failing at mutual aid, though. If we make enough money to move her out, I might as well just buy her a plane ticket to my country. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're wanting that, that would be great. But, I mean, it's hard when we see people we care about in these kinds of situations, especially when we have limited means to do anything about it. But I don't think that means you should discredit what you are doing in trying to be there for her. She wants it is more important. Yeah. She expressed interest in wanting it before, but I'll have to double check. Yeah. Yeah, you'll have to let me know what happens. I hope that she can get out of that situation. And I'm glad that she has you to be able to actually talk about the situation and have someone that is aware and that she can feel safe around. It's like that also is important too. It can't provide shelter. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when, most of us are struggling to provide shelter for ourselves, too. Yeah, I hope that works out. Keep us updated on that. Don't be too hard on yourself, though. Even though I know that's a hard situation to be in for you, especially her. Yeah, keep us updated. Because, being there emotionally is also really important. With people that I have cared about who have been in abusive situations, even just having the emotional support, that really is important because abusers try to isolate people and make them feel like they don't have anyone else. So I'm glad that she has you. Sending you some virtual hugs.
Was actually criticized
if you're
and forced
into
to
that.
resign for
That
attending
is.
a ceremony on Ambedkar Jayanti where he repeated the same vows that Ambedkar
I
expressed
agree
in
with you.
56.
Yes,
So
sir.
if anything, the quality of our tolerance has gone down since then. And today's Hindutva movement, unlike the time of Savarkar, today's Hindutva movement is far more intolerant of this kind of thing than 65 years, 67 years ago.
I'm feeling really bad about this because we could
But thank you very much, Mr. Tharoor.
I'm responding to people
Morale
looking most
is very
imploring.
important.
So the
Yeah.
gentleman with the glasses and the beard towards the end of that row, yeah.
Hug,
like you
peacock.
said, yeah. Keep going, straight ahead. Yeah, perfect. And then we'll go to the gentleman in blue and then the gentleman in the pink at the back, and that's probably going to be
Two
it.
crow feathers in my straw hat. I love that. I love crows. I just love birds.
A very good evening to you, sir. My name is Vaishnav Mahajan. I'm a student of MPhil in nuclear engineering at Cambridge, and I come from New Delhi, India. So my question is, what's your personal take on the fact that, do you think that Dr. Ambedkar's ideas, what he envisioned for independent India and what he worked so passionately for,
hang in
do you
there.
think that we're following his teachings, and to what extent we are? And what's
And
the future
if she
of the caste
doesn't
system
know,
and
you
what
can
do you see in
always
the next 10 or 20 years? Will it stay permanently as it
make
is
it known to her.
going forward the next 20 years, or what subtle changes we might get to see?
Well, counterfactual is always very difficult to argue and very difficult to predict the future.
Speaking of
if you'd asked
birds,
someone
we
like
had
Nehru
a
or
couple of
Ambedkar in the 1950s, they
ravens
would have said
that
the caste
would
system was bound to
land
disappear.
on
It's
this dead
an anachronism in
tree
today's world.
outside.
And in fact, it got more entrenched.
And I haven't seen them for a while, and now I feel like
Will
I've
its
missed my
toxic ill
chance to
effects
befriend
persist?
them.
I think perhaps not. I think the increasing consciousness within India,
I'm
abroad,
sending
and so
that
on,
out
the
in the
iniquities
world.
and the
I want
horrors
to
that this kind of discrimination
befriend
entails
some
should,
ravens
see its gradual extinction.
and
There was a very
crows.
interesting study done, a poll done, which revealed for me the shocking news that 23% of Indians still practice untouchability. And then somebody else said, but my God, 77% don't. Think of the progress we've made. So maybe 10 years from now, that 23% will be 10 or 13%. Another 10 years from now, it may be down to 3. And it'll be gone in 25. I don't know. I hope so. But the fact that there are people who still practice untouchability is a revelation to some of us who would never dream of doing so, and who are appalled that it's still there. So in the long term, I think it will disappear. How long the long term will be depends on each successive generation. Yours has a good crack
Do
at
you know
changing
if,
things for the better as you take the slots that we are vacating.
your
And I hope that
puppy
you will,
girl
stand
would
up for
be
equality and
interested in a
fraternity and
bracelet?
ensure that people are
I know that's
treated with
kind of
honor and
lame, but if
Shashi
there are
Jairam
colors
Ji.
that
My
she
name is
would
Sudesh. I
like,
teach accounting at the Judge Business School. My question is simply that in the context of Hinduism, should we even use the term caste? Because as I understand, and my understanding is limited, the word caste is not actually a word that originates from Hinduism.
Well, that's true. It's a Portuguese word. We had two ideas in Hinduism, Varna and Jati.
Yeah.
And the complication is that Varna probably started off to some degree, that's one of the theories anyway, as a sort of apartheid system that,
yeah,
that may have come
that's okay.
when
I
some
understand.
sets of races
Don't
were mixing
worry.
with other sets of races in the same temporal space and drew some distinctions.
You can
Varna
also
does
just
relate
say
to
that I
caste. That's
make
precisely why I was saying
bracelets
like an
for
apartheid system.
chatters,
But then it
specifically
changed from that into a
subscribers.
profession-based concept. And in fact, even the Purusha Sukta verse,
There's
which
also
describes
very
how God created the perfect
pro-kink
man and how the Brahmins came out of his head, his
community.
brain, and the Kshatriyas were his arms, and the Vaishyas were his legs and thighs, and the Sudras were his feet, and so
Why
on.
these
And of course,
colors?
the Dalits were completely out of
Night
that.
Nalav
All of that may have
requested
been a later
the colors
interpolation, but it was still
for
linked to what
the
they
Belgian
did,
flag,
not what they look like.
where
And
they're
then ultimately,
located.
Jatis fragmented
So,
into lots and
this
lots
is
of
for
sub-jatis. So
them.
today when you speak of what is somebody's jati, there may be 3,000 jatis of people who are collectively lumped together as, say, Dalits. And therefore, it becomes extremely difficult. The Portuguese word caste is as good a term as any.
I also have been making some bracelets with the colors of flags of the places that the U.S. is currently being an aggressor to, like Venezuela, Cuba, Palestine, Sudan, Iran, obviously, Lebanon, basically like the whole world, I guess. I'm wanting to find some mutual aid in each of these places to donate money to like maybe sell these.
Kind of mainstream books you'll get out there is Arundhati Roy's The Doctor and the Saint, where like you have both of them discussed together. You can't find the annihilation of caste separately, and just given the issues that Ambedkar had with.
No, I think it is possible to.
I need to get more colors. So I can continue. Like I'm running out of greens.
If you read my book, which is not a very long book to read, you will find I've gone into this in far more detail.
The Palestinian flag,
I would say that
the Lebanese flag, the Iranian flag.
That I would agree with Ambedkar were either wrong or out of date already, of which, for example, his emphasis on
I don't know,
on sort of an idealized
like,
notion of the villages as sort of almost autonomous.
How do we
republics within the
stop
unity of India?
This imperialist violence? That would be best. If, like, on the other hand, we didn't have all these fascist people who are intent on terrorizing the world. But
now, he was right in the short term. He may well turn out to be wrong.
How do you
in the
feel
long
about
term,
the Iranian
the world has also
monarchy?
Down from
if I
that emphasis. So I think inevitably urbanization is going to happen.
I mean,
industrialization might well change with time.
I'm probably not like the most informed on it.
There's nothing
but
wrong with Gandhi's emphasis on
I think the monarchy still had like a lot of vestiges of conservatism in it. I think monarchies in general are kind of dumb just because it's creating this hierarchy, a class of people who are in a ruling class who inherently benefit from lower classes.
I was very disappointed
but,
in one of Ambedkar's last interviews to the BBC, which is actually Googleable on YouTube.
The people of Iran are still currently in a fairly like strict environment. They have some limitations there. I think the limitations are maybe not as extreme as what we're kind of propagandized to believe in the Western world.
Tell me where I have failed you.
But they still are.
Whereas Ambedkar was much more rejecting and resentful.
Another one of these nations that has ingratiated religion and government, and that never leads to equal treatment with people and its own tool of oppression.
15-second question and a 30-second answer. Because we want to do some book signing and conversation as well.
I don't know.
Question, please.
Does that answer your question? I'm also still trying to learn more about Iranian history.
I even said to the master, I'd rather not even make a speech. I'd rather just answer questions.
Having gone to public school in the U.S., we learn basically nothing about actual history when it comes to the world. Because then we would have to confront how the U.S. is the largest exporter of terrorism.
But should not be imposed on people. And you've got to carry everyone along. And I think
I'm satiated.
Which has been flirting with this idea of floating trial balloons from time to time, has taken no concrete steps yet.
What do you think
about
the monarchy?
Identifying what elements would fit into it. And there's some criticism from the Hindutva right, saying, what Hindu customs are you going to remove in a uniform civil code? And of course, the Muslim community sees this as a direct assault on Muslim personal law. So there are some real tensions and issues around this still. And if a government with a 303-seat majority in Parliament is unwilling or is still reluctant to venture forth on this, even though it is an article of faith for them,
kids pledge allegiance to the flag and treat like a living being. Exactly. That always confused me as a kid, and it felt cult-like. I would know, having grown up Mormon, which is also a cult.
Thank the British first of all for having given us all these.
It's like we aren't even pledging it to the nation. That still is concerning, but it's the flag.
As many of these
that's just
were.
bathed in blood.
We are going to have to end there in the interests of books and private conversation. Shashi Tharoor, this has been an amazing event, and I'm just so grateful to you for giving us your time and coming to Selwyn.
I'm very touched that you invited me. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're very honoured to have you here, given your amazing record in public life. The book I can really highly recommend, because I started on a journey by reading it, and I can highly recommend it. Ambedkar clearly is somebody that a lot of people will want to know more about, or those of you who are experts will, I hope, be consolidated in that knowledge by your very interesting answers tonight. There will be a lecture specifically on indentureship we aim to do before the summer break, but otherwise, thank you for a brilliant audience tonight. You've been amazing. Apologies to the people I didn't get questions put to, and you can now upbraid me afterwards. And also people online. We got a lot of questions online, but I thought we should concentrate on the audience here. So thank you very much indeed. Shashi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say what I feel about monarchies as my head of state of England, so showing a vehement dislike for monarchies may look bad in court. Fair. That's fair. Okay. So we got a mix of perspectives in this video where I'm glad he acknowledged that Ambedkar was more of a reformer than he was a revolutionary, and that there are revolutionaries and revolutionary action in India that has been very necessary for liberation and moving the government to actually eliminate the caste system, if it is only in name and not in practice. I was told hyper-paranoid is better than jail. True. It's good to be careful. Especially with, like, the surveillance state that we are now living in. I mean, in the US especially, but, like, the world at large and AI, it's good to be careful. Revolutionary action is a thing in India for sure, yes. Do you know about the Marxist Party of India? I do. I don't know what their name is, though. I, to be honest, confuse a lot of the names of Indian political parties. Yeah, there are a lot of Maoists in India, especially among the Dalit people, the lower caste, the untouchables. Communist Party of India. There you go. I'm going to bring this up. Officially known as, this is the name I was looking for, the Bharatiya Communist Party. Okay. Often known as Marxvadi Communist Party. Maybe that's why I was confused. Because it's just saying it, Communist Party. The Communist Party of India, CPI or M, is a Marxist-Leninist political party in India. It is the largest communist party in India in terms of membership and electoral seats, and one of the 6 national parties of India. The party was founded through a splitting from the Communist Party of India in 1964. The CPI, parentheses M, quickly became the dominant faction. The 34 years of CPIM-led Left Front rule in West Bengal was the longest-serving democratically elected communist-led government in the world. It emerged as the 3rd largest party of the parliament in the 2004 national election. Presently, CPI, parentheses M, is a part of ruling alliances in 2 states, the LDF in Kerala, which it leads. Yeah, so that is one of the reasons why Kerala has more freedom, because they have had a saturation of Marxists, communists, Maoists, people who are engaged in revolutionary action, which it leads. And the SPA in Tamil Nadu, it also has representation in the legislative assemblies of 7 states. The All India Party Congress is the supreme authority of the CPI, parentheses M. However, during the time between 2 party congresses, the Central Committee is the highest decision-making body. The Central Committee shall elect from among its members a Politburo, including the General Secretary. The Politburo carries on the work of the Central Committee between its 2 sessions and has the right to take political and organizational decisions in between two meetings of the Central Committee. I don't like Maoism. It scares me as an anarchist. I've seen how in other countries Maoist organizers assault anarchists. Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. And we also have to acknowledge as well that like all of these different factions and where they're located are not always the same, or like there's a lot of diversity even within these Maoist movements. 300 Maoist Leninists assaulted 40 anarchists in their universities, violently beating them, some needing 40 stitches. Jesus. After being scalped. My uncles are Maoists and were Maoist insurgents in their home country. Interesting. Yeah, it's like it depends on who is instigating the action, what action they are engaging in, how, like, not all anarchists are the same, how there's a huge diversity of thought within anarchism, how you can have right-wing anarchists, left-wing anarchists. Yeah. But I mean, it's good to understand all of the complexities of these various ideologies and how people can use them for good or for nefarious means. Yeah, so I think there's quite a bit of diversity within all of these ideologies. Okay. Just adjusting that. Let's get into Banned Book Club. Whoops. Okay. So in this section of The Giver, this is definitely the climax. So after Jonas saw his dad release, which is just euthanize a baby, that Jonas is extremely upset, and for good reason, because he actually understands death now, understands the impact of death. That's banned. We read that in school. Yeah, it's banned in a lot of places, especially as fascism rises, when we have white Christian nationalism rising in the US, that we see a crackdown on this, especially when you have a main character that is taught to not trust their society and actively resist it. But the whole process and like desire to want to ban things is so childish to me. That they're like, it's always people who are like, my parental rights, I don't want you teaching this to my kids. It's like, okay, so now you're removing all of the books from the library. How is that not infringing on the parental rights of other parents to actually let their kids read this stuff? Yeah. It's so lame. Okay. So when Jonas finds that out, he is extremely upset, and the Giver is comforting him, and he's like, I don't want to be by my dad now. And yeah, that makes sense. You just saw him euthanize a newborn, and he's very upset because he said, he lied to me. The Giver says it's what he was told to do, and he knows nothing else. So this also reveals how when there is effective brainwashing and capturing the minds of people, that they don't have really a sense of autonomy, and how they just act in ways that are contradictory, where lies don't mean anything because there's this larger good, supposedly, that they are supporting, that as long as they are falling in line with the structure and will of the state, that they are able to act in ways that are unethical, but they don't view it that way. And how when people are kept ignorant of not having collective knowledge, collective memory, history be taught to people, like as we were just talking about not being taught history in the US, that it allows the same atrocities to continue. And that people can be advocating for these atrocities, as we see. he brings up Fiona, the girl that he has a crush on, and he's like, oh, she's going to learn how to do the releasing thing and euthanizing people because she works for the senior center, or like the House of Old is what they call it. And so then he has dinner with the giver, and he's like, I don't want to live like this. Essentially, he's like, I don't want to live here in this place. It's really difficult to actually feel emotions, understand history, and be around all of these people that don't. This is what the giver says. The worst part of holding the memories is not the pain, it's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. And then Jonas says, I've started to share them with you, Jonas said, trying to cheer him. That's true. And having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change. For years, I've felt that they should, but it seemed so hopeless. Now, for the first time, I think there may be a way, the giver said slowly. And you brought it to my attention, barely, he glanced at the clock, 2 hours ago. Jonas watched him and listened. So they then start planning Jonas leaving. We saw how with the previous giver, who was the daughter of the receiver, scratch that. The previous receiver, Rosemary, was the daughter of the giver, and that when she was released, because she filed for release after learning about all of the atrocities that human history contains, which, yeah, that makes sense, that when she died, all of her memories that had been transferred to her from the giver then were let out and disseminated essentially to the people. And then there was this whole process of brainwashing again and like wiping people's memories so that they don't have a memory of this instance happening. And the giver is saying, like, I'm going to try to give you all of these memories, or a lot of memories, before you leave, so that when you leave, you actually exit the borders of this land, that people will then have memory. They'll have collective memory and history, and then it will fundamentally change the society where they will actually have individuality, a desire to have control over their own lives, like marry who they want to marry, have the career that they want, rather than everything being assigned to them by the government. Jonas wishes that the giver could go with him, and this is such a revolutionary thing to do that, like, reading this as a kid, that's probably why, like, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but why they ban it is that you see this kid who is a hero acting alone against the society that he grows up in, against their control, and is escaping and actively restoring their humanity. So the giver said that he is going to stay because when Jonas leaves, there's going to be a lot of chaos, that people will be overwhelmed with all of these memories and feelings, and the giver will be there to help them through it, essentially like therapizing, guiding them through it. Okay. I'm finding this part that I was wanting to talk about. Oh, yeah. The giver says, I've been a little selfish. I haven't given his favorite memory to Jonas. He said, I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. And Jonas is like, that's okay. You should keep it. And he was describing how when he first was exhibiting these traits of being capable of being a receiver, that he would hear things. And he then is describing it. When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me, but it wasn't the seeing beyond for me, like how Jonas was seeing colors first. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. What did you hear? He asked. Music, the giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it is called music. I'll give you some before I go." Jonas shook his head emphatically. "No, giver," he said. "I want you to keep that, to have with you when I'm gone." Like, you could give him a little bit of music. Music is delightful. But yeah, living in a society where there isn't music, among many other things. So now Jonas is going home. He is planning on leaving. His parents, he knows that they're going to be irritated, but that they won't care a ton because they don't actually know what true love means or loss. They plan it out, and Jonas said that he was going to take Gabriel, the baby that his dad had been taking care of that was staying with them. Normally they don't have like 3 children to a family, but the dad, as a nurturer of these infants, got permission to take this baby home to give some extra care, and he still wasn't like measuring up to their arbitrary standards of fitness. So there's like very clear references to eugenics in this book. That Jonas is like, no, he's wonderful. I love him. I don't want you to release him, which is euthanize him, because he isn't, some nights he doesn't sleep through the night. And then Jonas learns that the previous receiver who was released, Rosemary, is the daughter of the giver. Okay, and so then the next night, Jonas was forced to flee. He goes on his bike. He is using, well, I guess it's not his bike. He's using his dad's bike, I think, because it actually has like the baby carrier. Yeah, because the next day, Gabriel, the baby, is scheduled to be released. And this is what Father says, Jonas's dad. "It's bye-bye to you, Gabe, in the morning," Father said in his sweet sing-song voice, which is just very terrified and horrified. Jonas reached the opposite side of the river, stopped briefly, and looked back. The community where his entire life had been lay below. Nope. The community where his entire life had been lived lay behind him now, sleeping. At dawn, the orderly, disciplined life he had always known would continue again without him. The life where nothing was ever expected, or inconvenient, or unusual. The life without color, pain, or past. He pushed firmly again at the pedal with his foot and continued riding along the road. It was not safe to spend time looking back. He thought of the rules he had broken so far, enough that if he were caught, now he would be condemned. It also is talking about how there is a morality to breaking rules and norms that are inherently oppressive. Then he lists off all of his supposed crimes, which is really just like getting food and leaving. So he understands that like time is running out, they are getting cold, and they're tired and hungry after they go through their food. So Jonas is giving Gabriel memories of like food and rest to help him get through it. Then there's this part. The most terrifying thing was the planes. By now, days had passed. Planes meaning like airplanes. Jonas no longer knew how many. The journey had become automatic. The sleep by day, hidden in underbrush and trees, the finding of water, the careful division of scraps of food, augmented by what he could find in the fields and the endless, endless miles on the bicycle by night. So he starts to get used to it. At first, he was extremely exhausted. His body wasn't used to that kind of exercise. And then he's getting stronger as time goes on. He can also see Gabriel's hair now, since he sees color, that he has golden curls. And then it ends with this. As he pedaled through the nights, through isolated landscape now, with the communities far behind, and no sign of human habitation around him or ahead, he was constantly vigilant, looking for the nearest hiding place should the sound of engines come. But the frequency of the planes diminished. They came less often, and flew, when they did come, less slowly, as if the search had become haphazard and no longer hopeful. Finally, there was an entire day and night when they did not come at all. So he's like, wow, I'm actually able to get away with this. What I really enjoy about this section is that it shows how the exchange of memory, sharing in experiences, trauma, joy that the giver and Jonas have together, that they have a way more profound connection to each other and love for one another than Jonas does with his parents. And that is, by nature, what happens when people are engaging in these pro-social activities of actually humanizing one another, prioritizing our humanity, and how this collective memory is a burden in a lot of ways when we learn about history, like as we're kids growing up learning about all of the atrocities in the world. It's like, oh, why do they always show us fairy tales when the world is nothing like this? Like, why are we always being lied to? But how, when we actually are able to confront these atrocities, that we then can act. And this is why societies today keep their populaces very ignorant. It is a weapon in order to preserve their control over people. So that's also why it's probably banned. But I really love this book. I felt like, I've said this before, but I really felt like reading it for the first time growing up. I think I was like 7 or something. And it gave me the understanding for the first time that there may be adults and authority figures that you can't trust, that there are people who are telling you what to do that may not be good. They might not be asking you to do things that are moral, and that there is a responsibility when you are able to see these things for yourself, the kind of oppression and disparities, discrimination that exist, that we have a responsibility to do something about it and act. Okay. And then we're going to read chapters 22 and 23, and then it will be done. And then we're going to move on to the next book. So I have 4 books that we're choosing between, and you all can let me know in this chat. I have also posted a poll on YouTube on the channel for the next book that we're reading. So I've chosen 4, mostly because the YouTube poll only allows 4 options. But the 4 that I have chosen are The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, 1984 by George Orwell, and All Boys Aren't Blue by George Johnson. So if any of those sound interesting, let me know. You can tell me here, vote on YouTube, whatever floats your boat. I think all of these books are very pertinent to current events. I was going to read The Outsiders next because my rationale was like, oh, we're going to go from least difficult reading and build up reading levels. But with the urgency of this moment, I think we need to jump into some of the more advanced reading and subject matter. Okay. So we'll quickly go over this speech by Danton, Georges Danton, who was a French revolutionary. And he was advocating for a dictator, essentially, that was to replace the king. And that's not great. But he is referenced in The Scarlet Pimpernel, and I think it's good to provide some context. Okay. Introduction. Jean-Jacques Danton. He was a man of Herculean proportions, with a massive head. I mean, from pictures, that does look to be correct. And same. I have a big head. Over a muscular neck, a broad brow, prominent broad nose, a sensuous mouth, and a vigorous chin. His fleshy face, disfigured by the smallpox, is expressive in a sense of humor, a delight in life, passion, and will. Such is Danton. Michelet says of him that his whole bearing was redolent of masculinity. He had something of the lion, something of the bulldog, and much of the steer. He is immoderate in enjoyment and wasteful of his powers. He lacks pertinacity. He lacks a patient, devoted application to the attainment of a single end. He is not a theorist. He is a man of action. In the moment of action, his energies riot to the full, like a torrent breaking down a mountain chain. At such moments, he lashes men on. He is himself a man of bold decisions and great measures. He is impeded by no petty considerations, by no fear. At bottom, he is of kindly nature, but when necessity demands it, he becomes ruthless to the point of brutality. His voice is sonorous, his speech impetuous, his gestures impressive, dramatic. He seizes his hearers and drags them to him. His opponents have rebuked him for his coarse, cynical, and vulgar speech, which seemed to have been dragged through the filth of the gutter. They assert that he maneuvered for the applause of the multitude by means of low comparisons and coarse jokes. I mean, coarse jokes I'm always for, always a fan. Of which many an anecdote is retailed, but these all are in contradiction with the speeches that have been actually preserved. There are not many such speeches, a few delivered in the Club of the Jacobins, a speech delivered to the Paris Town Council, another to the National Assembly, and the speeches delivered in the Convention. Unlike the other orators of his time, he took no steps to preserve his fame. He never gave the journalists any manuscripts. Others might meticulously prepare their speeches, adorn them with fine phrases, and then read them in the Parliament or in the club. These were mere written speeches, academic disputations. Danton always spoke extemporaneously, which means like off the top of the head. His words poured forth without guidance. Therefore, his frequent repetitions, but therefore also his immense and direct influence. His speech rolled along in mighty billows, supported by his inner emotion. He was fond of many-colored plastic pictures. Okay. He often confused them, however, and then confused the pictures or his audience. However, and then his opponents covered him with ridicule. They ridicule him also because he often speaks of himself, because he boasts with naive pride of his athletic powers and lauds his present and future performances. But he does not speak in order to magnify himself. He is not one of the irresistibles. He speaks only when he has something to say. In almost every case, his speech ends with the proposal of some concrete measure destined to save the situation. And in most cases, his proposals result in resolutions by the convention. Okay. So, skipping ahead. Sorry if I'm making you sick. I wanted to get to the speech about the poor. Make way for the poor. From a poster appearing in Paris in September 1792. from a poster, so this is something that he wrote. The former aediles of Paris wanted to turn the city into a city of luxury, of wealth, and of pleasure. May its new magistrates aid it in becoming a mighty city of labor, the beehive of all France. The whole secret of the situation consists in turning the present system upside down. Formerly, the rich ruled Paris. Now we cry, make way for the poor, it is now their turn to rule. We must have no communal taxes any more. Living must become cheaper in Paris as well as everywhere else. And in less than a century, the needy classes will constitute 3/4 of the population of Paris as a result of a natural and irresistible progress. Under these circumstances, the last word will inevitably remain with the Republic, for a throne could not offer resistance for long, being beaten to and fro in a capital, in which the masses of the people are called upon today, tomorrow, and at every future time to rise in insurrection. Oh, I thought it was longer than that. Okay. I also wanted to read this, Unity and Strength. So essentially, going back to this, he is talking about how there needs to be more equitable circumstances for the poor. Delivered in the convention, March 10th, 1793. Bad news is being told to the convention. The armies report nothing but reverses. Liège is occupied by the enemy. It has been necessary to raise the siege of Maastricht. The assembly is in great excitement. Counter-revolutionary plots are being unmasked all over the country. It is under these circumstances that Danton delivers this speech and the one that follows it. Citizens, this is not a time for deliberation. This is a time for action. You have adopted a decree, and this decree must rouse the latent forces everywhere. Let your commissaries set forth. Let them set forth at once. Let them set forth tonight. Let them set forth tonight. And let them say to a class of citizens who are cowardly indeed, let them say to the rich, your riches must repay us for our efforts. The people has nothing but its blood, which it is gladly shedding. Now come forth, you wretches, and shed your riches. Behold the fair destiny that faces you, citizens. Can you hesitate? You have a whole nation to use as a lever. You have liberty and reason as your fulcrums, and you shall not be able to lift the world out of its hinges. You must show strength of purpose. Yes, it is true that we have sometimes been lacking in this characteristic. I shall set aside all passions, all party interests. They shall all be foreign to me. I have no other interest than that of the people. I appeal to everyone that wishes to do justice to me to bear out in this. Under far more difficult circumstances, when the enemy was at the gates of Paris, I said to the false patriots who were then in power, your dissensions are harmful to the success of liberty. I repudiate you all. You are all traitors. Let us beat the enemy, and then we can discuss, I said at the time. What is my reputation to me? What use is my reputation to me, so long as France may be free? What matters it that my name be smirched? I permit them to call me a drinker of blood. Let us drink the blood of the enemies of humanity, but let Europe at last be free. And it is for you to create this liberty. The world is waiting upon your courage. Is there any fear that your assembly is becoming poorer in good citizens? Vain fears, miserable subterfuges. Set forth, carry your energy everywhere, and you will have discharged your duty. The most sacred duty you can fulfill to the people is to say to it, follow our instructions. Let our enemies perish. The national debt shall be whittled down at the expense of those who wish to destroy the nation. Equilibrium will be established between the prices of goods and the amounts of your wages, and then, at last, the people will be able to enjoy the pleasures of freedom. Mark this, and particularly, let the rich mark this. Either we must pay for our debts with our conquests, or the rich will have to pay, and mighty soon, too. Well, the situation of the country is hard. The currency of France has been disorganized. There's too much paper money as compared with our resources. The people have been worked up by intrigues, this is the truth. England has done everything to lead the people astray, but also there is a complete lack of proportion between the wages of the impoverished and the price of foodstuffs. Sounds familiar. The worker receives far less than he needs. This must be changed. A great effort must be made, a great blow struck. Let us occupy Holland. Let us rally the party of the patriots in England. Let us send forth the troops of France, and our country is saved. Your names will go down in glory to posterity. Do your duty, therefore. Let us have no dissensions, no quarrels. Let us rise on the flood of liberty. Okay. There we go. One of his rousing speeches. Yeah, some of the sentences were like a little bit halting in some ways, but you can tell that he is speaking off the top of the head. Because often that is how we do speak, not necessarily in clean grammatical sentences. Okay, let's get into the reading. So in the previous chapter, we had Marguerite, who was assigned by Chauvelin, threatened as she would believe, but Chauvelin had to coerce her by saying, like, her brother will be in danger if she doesn't help him, which, honestly, we have to resort to these kinds of tactics when we are dealing with outsized powers. And Marguerite was able to intercept a note that she got from one of the people who she knows is in the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel, who is Sir Andrew Ffoulkes. And that she was able to read this little bit of paper and get out of the situation without too much suspicion, drawing too much attention to herself. And then she went to dance and continued to be at the party. Okay, so we're still at the party. Chapter 13. Either or. The few words which Marguerite Blakeney had managed to read on the half-scorched piece of paper seemed literally to be the words of fate. Start myself tomorrow. This she had read quite distinctly. Then came a blur caused by the smoke of the candle, which obliterated the next few words. But right at the bottom, there was another sentence which now was standing clearly and distinctly, like letters of fire before her mental vision. If you wish to speak to me again, I shall be in the supper room at 1 o'clock precisely. The whole was signed with a hastily scrawled little device, a tiny star-shaped flower which had become so familiar to her, which is the signature of the Scarlet Pimpernel. It's supposed to look like the flower, the Scarlet Pimpernel. 1 o'clock precisely. It was now close upon 11. The last minuet was being danced, with Sir Andrew Ffoulkes and beautiful Lady Blakeney leading the couples through its delicate and intricate figures. Close upon 11. The hands of the handsome Louis XV clock upon its ormolu bracket seemed to move along with maddening rapidity. 2 hours more, and her fate and that of Armand will be sealed. In 2 hours she must make up her mind whether she will keep the knowledge so cunningly gained to herself, and leave her brother to his fate, or whether she will willfully betray a brave man, whose life was devoted to his fellow man, who was noble, generous, and above all, unsuspecting. Yeah, he is only generous to people of his aristocratic class. To be clear. Not to all human beings. It seemed a horrible thing to do, but then there was Armand. Armand, too, was noble and brave. Armand, too, was unsuspecting. And Armand loved her, would have willingly trusted his life in her hands. And now, when she could save him from death, she hesitated. Oh, it was monstrous. Her brother's kind, gentle face, so full of love for her, seemed to be looking reproachfully at her. You might have saved me, Margot, he seemed to say to her, and you chose the life of a stranger, a man you do not know, whom you have never seen, and preferred that he should be safe, whilst you sent me to the guillotine. All these conflicting thoughts raged through Marguerite's brain, while that smile upon her lips, she glided through the graceful mazes of the minuet. She noted, with that acute sense of hers, that she had succeeded in completely allaying Sir Andrew's fears. Her self-control had been absolutely perfect. She was a finer actress at this moment, and throughout the whole of this minuet, than she had ever been upon the boards of the Comédie Française. But then a beloved brother's life had not depended on her histrionic powers, because she was an actress before she married Sir Percy. Which, her moving up in class in that way, being like a working person from a working class to having a title of nobility, was not very likely. She was too clever to overdo her part, and made no further allusions to the supposed billet doux, which means love note, which had caused Sir Andrew Ffoulkes such an agonizing 5 minutes. She watched his anxiety melting away under her sunny smile, and soon perceived that, whatever doubt may have crossed his mind at the moment, she had, by the time the last bars of the minuet had been played, succeeded in completely dispelling it. He never realized in what a fever of excitement she was, what effort it cost her to keep up a constant ripple of banal conversation. When the minuet was over, she asked Sir Andrew to take her into the next room. "I have promised to go to supper with His Royal Highness," she said, "but before we part, tell me, am I forgiven?" "Forgiven?" "Yes. Confess, I gave you a fright just now. But remember, I am not an English woman, and I do not look upon the exchanging of billets doux as a crime." Whoops, as I just, break into an accent. "And I vow I'll not tell my little Suzanne. But now, tell me, shall I welcome you at my water party on Wednesday?" "I am not sure, Lady Blakeney," he replied evasively. "I may have to leave London tomorrow." "I would not do that if I were you," she said earnestly. Then, seeing the anxious look once more reappearing in his eyes, she added gaily, "Same. No one can throw a better ball than you can, Sir Andrew. We should so miss you on the bowling green." He had led her across the room to one beyond, where already His Royal Highness was waiting for the beautiful Lady Blakeney. "Madam, supper awaits us," said the prince, offering his arm to Marguerite, "and I am full of hope. The goddess Fortune has frowned so persistently on me at hazard that I look with confidence for the smiles of the goddess of beauty." "Your Highness has been unfortunate at the card tables?" asked Marguerite, as she took the prince's arm. "Aye, most unfortunate. Blakeney, not content with being the richest among my father's subjects, has also the most outrageous luck. By the way, where is that inimitable wit? I vow, madam, that this life would be but a dreary desert without your smiles and his sallies." She uses that phrase a lot, Baroness Orczy. A desert without this. Okay, that's the end of chapter 13. I think we have time for chapter 14. Chapter 14, 1 o'clock precisely. Supper had been extremely gay. Well, it always is in my household. All those present declared that never had Lady Blakeney been more adorable, nor that demmed idiot, Sir Percy, more amusing. His Royal Highness had laughed until tears streamed down his cheeks at Blakeney's foolish yet funny repartees. His doggerel verse, "We seek him here, we seek him there," etc., was sung to the tune of Ho, Merry Britons, and to the accompaniment of glasses knocked loudly against the table. Lord Grenville, moreover, had a most perfect cook. Some wags asserted that he was a scion of the old French noblesse, who, having lost his fortune, had come to seek it in the cuisine of the Foreign Office. Marguerite Blakeney was in her most brilliant mood, and surely not a soul in that crowded supper room had even an inkling of the terrible struggle which was raging within her heart. The clock was ticking so mercilessly on. It was long past midnight, and even the Prince of Wales was thinking of leaving the supper table. Within the next half hour, the destinies of two brave men would be pitted against one another, the dearly beloved brother, and he, the unknown hero. Marguerite had not even tried to see Chauvelin during this last hour. She knew that his keen, fox-like eyes would terrify her at once, and incline the balance of her decision towards Armand. While she did not see him, there still lingered in her heart of hearts a vague, undefined hope that something would occur, something big, enormous, epoch-making, which would shift from her young, weak shoulders this terrible burden of responsibility, of having to choose between such two cruel alternatives. But the minutes ticked on with that dull monotony which they invariably seem to assume when our very nerves ache with their incessant ticking. After supper, dancing was resumed. His Royal Highness had left, and there was general talk of departing among the older guests. The young were indefatigable, and had started on a new gavotte, which would fill the next quarter of an hour. Marguerite did not feel equal to another dance. There is a limit to the most enduring self-control. Escorted by a cabinet minister, she had once more found her way into the tiny boudoir, still the most deserted among all the rooms. She knew that Chauvelin must be lying in wait for her somewhere, ready to seize the first possible opportunity for a tete-a-tete, which is a head-to-head. His eyes had met hers for a moment after the fore-supper minuet, and she knew that the keen diplomatist, with those searching, pale eyes of his, had divined that her work was accomplished. Fate had willed it so. Marguerite, torn by the most terrible conflict heart of woman can ever know. It's so privileged to be like, this is my worst problem. I mean, it's still her brother and she cares about him, but she is actively choosing to be a class traitor. Had resigned herself to its decrees, but Armand must be saved at any cost. He, first of all, for he was her brother, had been mother, father, friend to her ever since she was a tiny babe, had lost both her parents. To think of Armand dying a traitor's death on the guillotine was too horrible, even to dwell upon, impossible in fact. That could never, never be. As for the stranger, the hero, meaning the Scarlet Pimpernel, the aristocrat, vigilante, who's not really a hero. Well, there let fate decide. Marguerite would redeem her brother's life at the hands of the relentless enemy, then let that cunning Scarlet Pimpernel extricate himself after that. Perhaps, vaguely, Marguerite hoped that the daring plotter, who for so many months had baffled an army of spies, would still manage to evade Chauvelin and remain immune to the end. She thought of all of this as she sat listening to the witty discourse of the cabinet minister, who no doubt felt that he found in Lady Blakeney a most perfect listener. Suddenly, she saw the keen, fox-like face of Chauvelin peeping through the curtained doorway. "Lord Fancourt," she said to the minister, "will you do me a service?" "I am entirely at your ladyship's service," he replied gallantly. "Will you see if my husband is still in the card-room? And if he is, will you tell him that I'm very tired and would glad to go home soon? The commands of a beautiful woman are binding on all mankind." Oh. Didn't know that. Pardon me. Even on cabinet ministers. Okay. Lord Fancourt prepared to obey instantly. "I do not like to leave your ladyship alone," he said. "Never fear. I shall be quite safe here, and I think undisturbed, but I am really tired. You know, Sir Percy will drive back to Richmond. It is a long way, and we shall not, and we do not hurry, get home before daybreak." Lord Fancourt had perforce to go. The moment he had disappeared, Chauvelin slipped into the room, and the next instant stood calm and impassive by her side. "You have news for me?" he said. An icy mantle seemed to have suddenly settled round Marguerite's shoulders. Though her cheeks glowed with fire, she felt chilled and numbed. "Oh, Armand, will you never know the terrible sacrifice of pride, of dignity, of womanliness? Of womanliness? What even does that mean? A devoted sister is making for your sake?" "Nothing of importance," she said, staring mechanically before her. "But it might prove a clue. I contrived, no matter how, to detect Sir Andrew Ffoulke in the very act of burning a paper at one of those candles in this very room. That paper I succeeded in holding between my fingers for the space of 2 minutes, and to cast my eyes on it for that of 10 seconds. That's quite the introduction. Why not get to the point? Time to learn of its contents? Asked Chauvelin quietly. He's like, okay. She nodded. Then she continued in the same even, mechanical tone of voice. In the corner of the paper, there was the usual rough device of a small, star-shaped flower. Above it, I read 2 lines. Everything else was scorched and blackened by the flame. And what were these 2 lines? Her throat seemed suddenly to have contracted. For an instant, she felt that she could not speak the words, which might send a brave man to his death. It is lucky that the whole paper was not burned, added Chauvelin with dry sarcasm, for it might have fared ill with Armand Saint-Just. Armand Saint-Just. What were the 2 lines, citoyenne? He's like, come on, out with it. One was, I start myself tomorrow, she said quietly. The other, if you wish to speak to me, I shall be in the supper room at 1 o'clock precisely. Chauvelin looked up at the clock just above the mantelpiece. Then I have plenty of time, he said placidly. What are you going to do? She asked. She was pale as a statue. Her hands were icy cold. Her head and heart throbbed with the awful strain upon her nerves. Oh, this was cruel. Cruel! What had she done to deserve all this? Her choice was made. Had she done a vile action, or one that was sublime? The recording angel who writes in the book of gold alone could give an answer, meaning like the book of life. What are you going to do? She repeated mechanically. Oh, nothing for the present. After that it will depend. On what? On whom I shall see in the supper room at 1 o'clock precisely. You will see the Scarlet Pimpernel, of course, but you do not know him. No, but I shall presently. Sir Andrew will have warned him. I think not. When you parted from him after the minuet, he stood and watched you for a moment or 2, with a look which gave me to understand that something had happened between you. It was only natural, was it not, that I should make a shrewd guess as to the nature of that something? I thereupon engaged the young gallant in a long and animated conversation. We discussed Herr Gluck's singular success in London, until a lady claimed his arm for supper. Since then? I did not lose sight of him through supper. When we all came upstairs again, Lady Portales buttonholed him, and started on the subject of pretty Mademoiselle Suzanne du Tournay. I knew he would not move until Lady Portales had exhausted the subject, which will not be for another quarter of an hour at least, and it is 5 minutes to 1 now. He was preparing to go, and went up to the doorway, where, drawing aside the curtain, he stood for a moment, pointing out to Marguerite the distant figure of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes in close conversation with Lady Portales. I think, he said with a triumphant smile, that I may safely expect to find the person I seek in the dining room, fair lady. There may be more than one. Whoever is there as the clock strikes 1 will be shadowed by one of my men. Of these, 1, or perhaps 2, or even 3, will leave for France tomorrow. One of these will be the Scarlet Pimpernel. Yes, and? I also, fair lady, will leave for France tomorrow. The papers found at Dover upon the person of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes speak to the neighborhood of Calais, of an inn which I know well, called Le Chat Gris, which means the grey cat, of a lonely place somewhere on the coast, the Père Blanchard's hut, which I must endeavour to find. All these places are given as the point where this meddlesome Englishman has bidden the traitor du Tournay and others to meet his emissaries. But it seems that he has decided not to send his emissaries, that he will start himself tomorrow. Now, one of those persons whom I shall see anon in the supper-room will be journeying to Calais, and I shall follow that person until I have tracked him to where those fugitive aristocrats await for him. Why is he telling her all of his plans? Stop. You can't trust her. For that person, fair lady, will be the man whom I sought for nearly a year. The man whose energy has outdone me, whose ingenuity has baffled me, whose audacity has set me wondering. Yes, me! who have seen a trick or two in my time, the mysterious and elusive Scarlet Pimpernel. And Armand, she pleaded, have I ever broken my word? I promise you that the day the Scarlet Pimpernel and I start for France, I will send you that imprudent letter of his by special courier. More than that, I will pledge you the word of France that the day I lay hands on that meddlesome Englishman, Saint-Just will be here in England, safe in the arms of his charming sister. And with a deep and elaborate bow, and another look at the clock, Chauvelin glided out of the room. It seemed to Marguerite that through all the noise, all the din of music, dancing, and laughter, she could hear his cat-like tread gliding through the vast reception rooms, that she could hear him go down the massive staircase, reach the dining room, and open the door. Fate had decided, had made her speak, had made her do a vile and abominable thing for the sake of the brother she loved. She lay back in her chair, passive and still, seeing the figure of her relentless enemy ever present before her aching eyes. When Chauvelin reached the supper-room, it was quite deserted. It had that woebegone, forsaken, tawdry appearance which reminds one so much of a ball dress the morning after. Half-empty glasses littered the table, unfolded napkins lay about the chairs. Turned towards one another in groups of twos and threes seemed like the seats of ghosts in close conversation with one another. These were sets of two chairs very close. There were sets of two chairs very close to one another in the far corners of the room, which spoke of recent whispered flirtations over cold game pie and champagne. There were sets of 3 and 4 chairs that recalled pleasant, animated discussions over the last scandal. There were chairs straight up in a row that still looked starchy, critical, acid, like antiquated dowagers. There were a few isolated, single chairs, close to the table, that spoke of gourmands intent on the most recherché dishes, and others overturned on the floor that spoke volumes on the subject of my Lord Grenville's cellars, meaning they were very drunk. Talking about the chairs, that's boring. It was a ghost-like replica, in fact, of that fashionable gathering upstairs. A ghost that haunts every house where balls and good suppers are given. A picture drawn with white chalk on a gray cardboard, dull and colorless, now that the bright silk dresses and gorgeously embroidered coats were no longer there to fill in the foreground, and now that the candles flickered sleepily in their sockets. Chauvelin smiled benignly and rubbed his long, thin hands together. He looked round the deserted supper-room, whence even the last flunky had retired in order to join his friends in the hall below. All was silence in the dimly lighted room, whilst the sound of the gavotte, the hum of distant talk and laughter, and the rumble of an occasional coach outside only seemed to reach this palace of the sleeping beauty as the murmur of some flitting spooks far away. It all looked so peaceful, so luxurious, and so still, that the keenest observer, a veritable prophet, could never have guessed that, at this present moment, that deserted supper-room was nothing but a trap laid for the capture of the most cunning and audacious plotter those stirring times had ever seen. Chauvelin pondered and tried to peer into the immediate future. What would this man be like, whom he and the leaders of the whole revolution had sworn to bring to his death? Everything about him was weird and mysterious. Weird. Which especially, talking about some of these older books, she's placing it in the 1700s, obviously, when the revolution is taking place. That weird was often used as, magical, mysterious, fate-like. The word, weird, W-Y-R-D, meant fate in Old English. His personality, which he so cunningly concealed, the power he wielded over 19 English gentlemen who seemed to obey his every command blindly and enthusiastically, the passionate love and submission he had roused in his little trained band, and, above all, his marvelous audacity, the boundless impudence, which had caused him to beard his most implacable enemies within the very walls of Paris. No wonder that in France the sobriquet of the mysterious Englishman Welcome, Tiny. Roused in the people a superstitious shudder. Chauvelin himself, as he gazed round the deserted room, where presently the weird hero would appear, felt a strange feeling of awe creeping all down his spine. Again, the, classist, oh, who is this going to be? Making it appear that, Chauvelin, a revolutionary, is going to feel awe-inspired by the Scarlet Pimpernel, when in reality he's like, who is this asshole? But his plans were well laid. He felt sure that the Scarlet Pimpernel had not been warned, and felt equally sure that Marguerite Blakeney had not played him false. If she had, a cruel look that would have made her shudder gleamed in Chauvelin's keen, pale eyes. If she had played him a trick, Armand Saint-Just would suffer the extreme penalty. But no, of course she had not played him false. Fortunately, the supper room was deserted. This would make Chauvelin's task all the easier when presently that unsuspecting enigma would enter it alone. No one was here now save Chauvelin himself. Stay, as he surveyed with a satisfied smile the solitude of the room. The cunning agent of the French government became aware of the peaceful, monotonous breathing of someone of my Lord Grenville's guests, who, no doubt, had supped both wisely and well, and was enjoying a quiet sleep, away from the din of the dancing above. Chauvelin looked round once more, and there in the corner of a sofa, in the dark angle of a room, his mouth open, his eyes shut, the sweet sounds of peaceful slumbers proceeding from his nostrils, reclined the gorgeously apparelled, long-limbed husband of the cleverest woman in Europe. So Sir Percy is sleeping in the corner. Chauvelin looked at him as he lay there placid, unconscious, at peace with all the world and himself, after the best of suppers, and a smile that was almost one of pity softened for a moment the hard lines of the Frenchman's face and the sarcastic twinkle of his pale eyes. Evidently, the slumberer, deep in dreamless sleep, would not interfere with Chauvelin's trap for catching that cunning Scarlet Pimpernel. Again, he rubbed his hands together. That's so... That's so cartoonish. Like he's the villain. And following the example of Sir Percy Blakeney, he too stretched himself out in the corner of another sofa, shut his eyes, opened his mouth, gave forth sounds of peaceful breathing, and ... waited. And this is a sketch, an illustration of Sir Percy lying on the couch. All right. We were able to get through 2 chapters, 13 and 14. Okay. That's going to be it for me today. Tomorrow, I would like to watch that Democracy Now! Video about data centers being built on indigenous land. Talk about some indigenous revolutionaries, and do more reading. Okay. Thank you for being here. It was good chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. You too, Tiny. Juniper also wishes you a good evening or day. And we'll see you soon. Okay, bye.